Turn my mic on. Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on November 21st, 2023. We are now live on YouTube, and for the folks watching virtually, we have a pretty full house here today, so it's good to see everybody. I'll do a roll call of council. I'm Mayor Shantz. I'm present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant. Present. Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. We need a motion that council reconvenes in open session, moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? That's carried. I'm going to start by acknowledging the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and Indigenous people have lived here from time immemorial. I thank the Chinatan, also called the Attawandaron or neutral people, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for our flora and fauna, each other, and the land that sustains us. Let's start with a moment of silence. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, there are no items to come forward from closed. We do have a memo to council from Clerk Jeff Smith regarding a resolution from the October 24th, 2023 council meeting, which had an omission. So, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Shantz. So as I pointed out in that memo, I think there was a conflict that I missed in your minutes. I've suggested the wording that you'd want there. If that's acceptable to council, can I ask that you pass the October 24th minutes as amended? I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions, concerns? Okay, so we would look for a motion then that the council minutes from October 24th, 2023 be approved as amended. Special council planning minutes from November 7th, 2023 and committee of the whole minutes from November 14th, 2023 be approved as written. Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? That's carried. We have no public meeting and no presentations, but we do have a number of delegations this evening on a number of different topics. We're going to start, first of all, with 22 Mockingbird. Before I go there, I should read a paragraph here that I have to read for delegations. We have some delegations this evening. Before we get started with that, I'd like to remind the delegates of the guidelines for participating. On this section of the agenda, individual delegations have 7 minutes and our group delegation has 15 minutes to speak. After you speak, please wait for questions from council. Once there are no further questions, you may return to your seat or turn off your video. I believe everyone's here in person tonight, though. You can leave anytime if you wish, or you're more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. So we will start with 22 Mockingbird Drive, agreement to lease space to Creative Beginnings Childcare Center. And I'll call on Director of Recreation and Community Services, Ann MacArthur.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. RCS staff are here to present our 11-2023 respecting 22 Mockingbird. And staff have a recommendation before council to authorize staff to negotiate terms and enter into a long-term agreement to lease with Creative Beginnings as per the Township's Delegation of Authority bylaw. In 2022, staff signed an agreement of purchase and sale that the Township acquired the property from the region after it was declared surplus. During budget deliberations, at that time, staff recommended to council that the building be demolished in 2024 as part of the capital plan. I would just want to highlight a couple of factors when we initially looked to demolish the building was regarding the condition, costly renovations, limited permitted uses of the site based on current zoning, the building being situated in a park, which is also within an established neighborhood. And then I should note, or staff would note, that the property has been vacant for in excess of 7 years. Mayor and staff were presented a request to lease a facility, which would include a significant capital investment to renovate the property. The site would open in 2024 and provide 75 additional childcare spaces for Elmira. Creative Beginnings, I've been advised by the region, has been working for months in collaboration with them, with Children's Services, to get an expansion site approved to help meet the needs of our community. Staff are now requesting council support to change direction regarding the future use of this property and shift from demolition to allow a daycare. And I would note that daycare is one of the few permitted uses under the township's current zoning of that property. Additionally, I would note that the agreement of purchase and sale, when we received the property from the region, had some parameters, and one of those was that it could only be leased to a nonprofit or not-for-profit entity. The proposal has been approved in principle by the region of Waterloo and now requires council approval to use the site by December 1st to allow the project to proceed to next steps and guarantee the 1.5 million in capital investment, and then to proceed to the next steps, which would include lease negotiation and construction. Staff would also highlight that the region is responsible for approving new childcare operators for admission into the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Program, which approves and provides funding and expansion of any daycare sites. The expansion proposal before us supports the region's growth strategy to provide additional care spaces. The region has advised that they are supportive of Creative Beginnings proposal for the site to provide full day licensed childcare for infant, toddler, and preschoolers. The lease agreement would see Creative Beginnings responsible for all capital improvements to the site, and it's 6,700 square feet. Staff would work with the tenant or the proposed tenant on the facility design, so we could consider some climate conscious components and amenities in the new reconstruction. So through the delegation of authority bylaw, staff have the authority to negotiate lease agreements. So staff would work on agreement outlining what the responsibilities for each party would be, which would include the lease rate and the term, who would do HVAC, utility costs, repair and maintenance, and things like that. Kind of standard lease clauses. I would highlight the township has several leases in place with various community groups, regional libraries, and a shared fire and emergency service facility in Breslau. And with several service clubs. So some of these leases are historical in nature, and newer leases tend to be more reflected kind of current best practices for shared operating costs and capital renewal. So in conclusion, staff are requesting council agree to shift direction on the use of the property. Staff are requesting council grant permission to Creative Beginnings to lease the space effective December 1. And lastly, that council authorize staff as per the delegation of authority bylaw to move forward to negotiate the lease. Should council not approve the recommendation in the report, there is a risk that Elmira may lose these spaces. And additionally, that would mean the status quo would continue to move forward, where staff would move forward with the capital plan to demolish the building in 2024. And with that, Thomas and I are happy to answer any questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? No. Councillor Koutoulakis.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Director MacArthur. I'm just wondering, the building was slated for demolition. We're going to be taking it on as a leaser. Are we concerned about the condition of this building, regardless of the amount of infrastructure improvements that are going into it?
Through your response to Councillor Koutoulakis. So part of the reason that we were looking to demolish was with regards to the condition, but also the limited use for the facility, the fact that it is really truly a daycare. The bones of the building are in order per our building condition assessments that we've had completed. However, there is work that needs to be done with regards to HVAC, roofing, finishes, that sort of thing. So I think once the if approved by council, once the tenant takes care of those in conjunction with the township, that it'll be a fine facility for daycare.
Anyone else? Okay, we have one delegate, Krista O'Connor of Creative Beginnings. Welcome, Krista.
I've prepared some notes. I do better just going on the fly, so bear with me. But Mayor Johnson, Council, thank you very much for having me here today to speak to you about creative beginnings. One of the things that we're looking at is a gap in the childcare system, and rural areas tend to see those gaps much more significantly. And so the region of Waterloo has actually identified a gap in childcare spaces here in Waterloo. So that's why I'm here today. My name is Krista O'Connor, and I'm the Executive Director of Creative Beginnings Childcare Center. I have focused my entire career actually in the nonprofit sector within childcare, all within Waterloo region. And I currently live in Waterloo with my family as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Creative Beginnings. We're a licensed non-for-profit childcare that's been in existence for over 30 years, providing exceptional care and early learning environments for children. Our locations have always focused in the more rural areas as it is in Wilmot Township, specifically Baden and New Hamburg. We provide vibrant play-based programs for children ages 0 to 12, which foster individualism, creativity, and socializations. Our programs also focus on the Ministry of Education's pedagogy approach for early learning in children, which is how children learn under the age of 4. We operate year-round services. We're open 7 to 6, and we currently serve over 300 children in 2 locations in Baden. As we've identified and we've heard tonight, there's a significant shortage of childcare. Elmira currently has 2 full-day licensed childcare facilities. And between those 2 locations, there's only 110 licensed childcare spaces for infants up to 4. Yet the wait list in Waterloo region ranges anywhere between 7,500 and 8,500 children on wait list, which is astronomical. And Woolwich has been identified as a high priority area by the region of Waterloo. But we have a solution. And that is to allow Creative Beginnings Childcare to lease the old Elmira Children's Center located on 22 Mockingbird Drive. As you know, the building had been slotted for demolition and by this very council, but they paused that, which I'm forever grateful for on behalf of the families that live in this township. Creative Beginnings is committed to funding $1.8 million into this project, and that commitment is to fully cover the cost, and therefore there would be no financial responsibility to the township. With the region's financial support for capital and expansion funding, and that will allow us to retrofit and renovate the building inside and out, and we'll be looking to care for upwards of 75 children ages 0 to 4. So in principle, as noted, Region of Waterloo has committed to that funding to get us up and running, and then also continuation funding for operating expenses thereafter. Creative Beginnings is also a committed partner in the Canadian Childcare and Early Learning program, which is the estimated $10 a day childcare, what should be slotted by 2024. And that's for all families to access, not just those requiring income subsidies. In doing this today, we asked for approval to allow the staff to negotiate terms of lease for us that we would potentially be able to open in July of 2024. A part of this project specifically outlines a wait list that would control and access to allow access for Woolwich families only before going anywhere else in the township to make sure that the services that we're providing are for local Woolwich families. The struggle is real in the entire province, but especially in rural areas, but we're here to help. And this will also create 30 employment opportunities for jobs that we will do. And then we're also going to try to source as much of the jobs to do locally as well. So I want to extend my gratitude to each of you for your attentive presence and affording me the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? No, I think if I could ask a question that was asked of me earlier, do you foresee any problems with the 6 months to get the facility up and running?
That's a super fair question. I think it's a fair question because that's a really short timeline. So in the months leading up to this, as you know, we met back in July initially. We went ahead and still processed everything as if this was going to come to fruition. So we've already sought out architects specific in the childcare build that are ready for us to send RFPs. I have a project manager already tentatively hired that hopefully will get communication shortly to say, let's go. I've already reached out to Thomas to see if we can get back into the building next week with contractors. And that's to make sure that we're doing as much as we can, as soon as we can, in hopes that this goes through. So anything outside of, things I don't know about, I don't know, but our hope is that we can definitely do that. Part of that is tied to our funding from the region as well, that date.
Thank you. Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to the delegate. You had mentioned something in your delegation that was interesting, and it's that you would give priority to residents of Woolwich. I'm just wondering if you can expand on that, or is there some sort of a sunset clause whereby after the initial wait list is crafted, you would reach out to other communities?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for that. So what that means for us too, and it was part of our agreement with the region Waterloo, is they've actually identified 13 to 15 areas in Waterloo region that are high needs expansion areas. And so outside of Elmira was actually designated as the area, not in Elmira. And so initially when I went to them to this proposal, they said no, because it wasn't directly within the area. And it's silly because I don't think you're going to get a childcare and a farmer's field in the rural area and get it serviced the way that you would need it serviced if it were into town. And so I presented them with a strategic direction plan to allow for a wait list that would support the structure of all the things financially encompassed in the identified area. So we would have a wait list that would support Woolwich Township, which it would include like lower income families, racially marginalized families, all things that have been outlined by the government, but then that will support Woolwich Township first. Yeah, and that will be transparent should this go to fruition as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, council, you have a recommendation in front of you. Is there any discussion? Would someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor
I
Eva.
had a question.
Sure.
Through you to Mr. Petherick, I'm just wondering if he can remind us how much the budget was in for demolition of the building, just so we have a sense of maybe what we're saving.
Good question. We'll give him a minute.
I did put him on the spot, yeah.
Oh, that's, that's okay. No, I just needed to go find how to turn my video back on. Through you, Madam Mayor, so we have $200,000 in the budget for the demolition. So far, I believe we spent just over $3,000. So the remainder is been unspent.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. Further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next is zone change application 10/2023, Michelle Shannon, and we have planner Sherwin Maloney virtually. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Zone change application 10/2023 on behalf of
Sorry,
RB.
Sherwin, can you hang on for a sec? Can we get the volume higher somehow? I don't know if you can do that or if we can do that here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Shantz. Zone change application 10/2023 on behalf of RBA Planning Consultants and Michelle Shannon to recognize an undersized farm parcel of 34 hectares, whereas 40 hectares is required. The zone change will allow the reduced parcel size to support a future severance. Staff is satisfied with the severance as it would be for agricultural purposes. It's consistent with the PPS, the ROP, and the official plan. And the retained lands at 1189 Beebe Place would still be able to function as a viable farm parcel. Staff are recommending approval of the bylaw. If you have any questions, I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No, I don't see any. Thank you for that. I do have Bob Black listed as a delegate. There he is. Welcome, Mr. Black.
Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, I'm here in support of the planning department staff recommendation and also to recommend to council that they adopt the zoning bylaw. As you may recall, I did make a presentation at the public meeting and at that time there were really no questions nor any other people to speak to the application. So I'll be brief. I won't take up to 7 minutes. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Black? No, don't see any. Thank you for coming in. So we have a resolution before us. Would someone like to move it? Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Schwint. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. So we have a memo requesting response to the province's announcement about winding back changes to the approved official plans. I think everybody here is probably aware of the process to date and what's out there. But I'm going to ask Director of Development Services, Deanne Fries, Manager of Planning, Jeremy Vink, to speak to the memo that is before you. There we are. So go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So for those who don't know the long history, back in 2022, the region was working through the regional official plan, doing their land needs analysis. It went through a quite extensive review, and they proposed 3 scenarios back in the day. That became scenario number 4 something or so by the time it got approved at regional council. And then back in April of this year, the province approved ROPA 6 with revised boundary lines taking the urban area to the countryside line, which was a dramatic change from what was recommended by the region in ROPA 6. So that was where we were working through and working towards until the province, as of just about a month ago, released that they'd be winding back these changes. And as of last week, they've introduced legislation to wind back all those approvals they've done and back in early this year, including the region of Waterloo. So we're back to the old boundaries that were pre-ROPA 6. So they've asked for 45 during this 45-day time period, which takes us to December the 7th, which time we're supposed to have our comments to them, to review and discuss how we move forward with the boundary adjustments. So they've asked the mayors of the local municipalities to provide those comments by December the 7th. So the question is how do we proceed, and some options, and that's where staff is bringing this forward tonight, is some opportunities to review and discuss. So staff is suggesting there's 2 main options. Option 1 is revert back to the region's approved boundaries that were done last year under ROPA 6, or to move forward as option 2 with the current countryside line boundaries that the province approved. Obviously, there's a variation in between, which would be option 3, is to try pick something in between and pick some lands over another. Staff isn't recommending that. It would get very confusing to try pick one piece of land over another to say they should be in versus another. So staff is ultimately saying the first 2 options are your 2 basic best choices. The reality of where we are doesn't put us in a good situation, but that's just the situation of where we are with what the province has done. So how do we move forward in the best interest of the municipality and to give us the best ultimate scenario in the long term? Obviously, winding back to ROPA 6 boundaries isn't easy because we've already started down a path with the new ROPA 6 boundaries with the province. So to wind back to the regions has made us realize that there's some challenges. We've seen that the work done, and we've started in Breslau, there's significant opportunities here to look at Breslau holistically and then long term, and to really plan the long-term best benefits for the township as a whole for Breslau, as well as some work in Elmira that's been taking place. To revert backwards tells us that we would actually, in the end, maybe not have the best plan for Breslau in the interim. We've also started a number of studies that have been undergoing that we were trying to implement this new ROPA 6 boundaries from the province. So those studies are underway, and some of that has demonstrated some significant useful information about how we can service these lands, both in Elmira and St. Jacobs, as well as significantly in Breslau area. So to kind of stop those projects that are already committed with consultants is a bit of a challenge, but there's also some good benefit of information that we glean by finishing these studies. Similarly, as I mentioned, the secondary plan work that we've started in Breslau has led us to some significant work and ideas about how Breslau should grow in the long term, and allows council to kind of finish that work to say, what should Breslau look like? How should that play out, those big term, long-term plans, rather piecemealing, adding chunks on over time? Ultimately, we can't plan for the long term if it's not in the settlement boundary. So the provincial policy statement, the Planning Act, doesn't really allow you to plan for lands outside of settlement boundary for settlement uses. We can't do that. We're presupposing something, and we can't implement that, obviously. So the only way to plan for that and implement it and designate those lands accordingly and appropriately is through an official plan process, and it has to be within a settlement boundary. So therefore, that's what we're looking at, that long-term plan of how Breslau might work. We've also seen that a bit in Elmira too. There's opportunities to look at how we can develop Elmira on both sides and look at opportunities for situations along dealing with some of our transportation issues along bypasses and encouraging growth on both the residential side, but more so on the employment side with much needed employment lands and opportunities in that area. So if we wind those all back, we see significant concerns. So what staff is basically recommending is we think the best approach to move forward from a municipal perspective, and not to forget that there are some landowners who have done work in the interim on their own, spending money on time and studies where they're going to lose value from work they've done, thinking the province boundaries are in place. We think the best approach on the whole is to move forward with the province's approved boundaries of the countryside line, but with caveats. We're not going to say it's a free-for-all. It is not a growth boundary to hit by 2051. It is not that we are going to let everything just happen. We're saying that it could only be done if, and there's a list of requirements here that we're suggesting, and I'll go through them here, is that the boundaries of the countryside line be viewed as long-term boundaries, not needed necessarily by 2051, but they would be for the longer term for the municipality to comprehensively review and develop those lands with a municipal comprehensive plan. Next point, we would that the township be required and permitted to implement proper growth controls to set clear and concise staging policies to meet the population targets of 2051 as set out in the regional official plan and approved by the province. So the numbers in the official plan from the region and the province never changed from population growth, even though the province gave us substantially more land than we needed to meet those targets. That staging shall take into account and be subject to available servicing at the regional wastewater treatment plants in Elmira and St. Jacobs. That the township develops and stages growth to meet or exceed minimum densities in the current official plan. And that's clearly because just to explain that one, Elmira and St. Jacobs are both at a density, a minimum should be of 45 people and jobs per hectare. Breslau is a more urban area, is supposed to achieve 55 people and jobs per hectare. We're not recommending to drop those down. The ROPA 6 boundaries by the region included these lands here. They don't show up as well on the screen, but they're here and then a bit on this far on the east side for some industrial lands. And then the pinkish color, which shows up nicer on the TV screen, by the way, was the countryside line that would include everything. So that would include all the green and the purple and the pink would be everything that included in the countryside line as the province and proposed. It's not as dramatic here as in St. Jacobs. There was some small portion here proposed to be added in St. Jacobs by the region, and then the province moved the line out a little bit further into the countryside towards the west here, just on the northwest corner of St. Jacobs. And lastly, Breslau. This is where we saw the dramatic changes. As you can see, the green is kind of that centerpiece that's looks a little misshapen actually when you see it this way. The region had proposed some additional lands north of Victoria Street and just east of Ebycrest, and then some additional lands just east of Ebycrest and north of Memo Street. So they had proposed those lands in there to be added. The province went to the bigger picture and they went to the pink, which goes way out to Shant Station, up to the proposed Highway 7, and then on the south end to the Kossuth, the boundary with us in Cambridge. So that just shows you the variations that took place from the province, from what the region had proposed to what the province put into place. But definitely, yes, we wouldn't need all those lands, not even in the short term, but this would just looking, like I said, to plan for the long-term growth in these areas, and then to set staging policies to grow slowly through that as we need to, based on population needs.
Thank you. And thank you to staff. This is all happening very quickly. Ms. Fries?
So just to expand a little bit on what Jeremy says, I think he covered all the options very well, but what staff is recommending is that if you looked at the original map, and I'll get Jeremy to share his screen again, with the settlement boundary that was proposed by the ROP and then the expanded to the countryside line, we think that the best way to comprehensively plan for this area for land use, for infrastructure, long-term servicing plans, even environmental protection, active transportation, planning around the airport and those uses, and also long-term planning for soft services and recreational facilities to service this area and really develop this area as a community over the long term. This is the best option for us to go. We also think this opens us up to opportunities for economic development because we would have land available, and also to meet the province's initiatives for additional housing and opportunities there as well. So we think that this is the best way to comprehensively plan for this area. And of course, as Jeremy mentioned, the key to this is really that we have staging and phasing policies to control the growth over time. So it's not all at once, but it's as we need the land, but we have a long-term plan to facilitate that plan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you again to the staff. I've met with you a few times to talk about, what this means for Woolwich and for the township. So I appreciate the two options that are before us today. The one aha moment I had was when you explained to me that you can't, according to the Planning Act, make definite plans outside of the urban boundary. And so that was an eye-opener for me to say why can't we look at the whole big picture. We have done managed growth for decades and it's worked well for us. We've been able to keep from spreading out too fast and too far. And yeah, I guess my big concern, as you indicated, Jeremy, is if the province takes away our ability to limit growth, even now today, it will change the nature of all of our urban settlements. And so I think maintaining that ability to stage our growth is really important. And the recommendation is contingent on allowing that staging, and I agree that if we can't limit the staging, then we just go back to the original plan and we do the best we can with it. So those are my discussions, and now I'll chair a meeting. Questions, council, for staff? Councillor Schwint.
Just a couple questions. Thanks for those maps. That really helps me visualize where we're at. But I'm going to ask for Elmira and St. Jacobs. I guess Breslau, it's an outlier, but how many acres difference is there between Europa 6 and the provincial ones? Ballpark, I guess.
I had kind of anticipated, so through you, Madam Chair, to the Councillor Schwint, the difference between the provinces, and so for Elmira, we are going from just over 1,000 hectares to almost 1,200 hectares. So we're adding about 240 hectares in Elmira alone from the province perspective. St. Jacobs, we're only adding about 52 hectares. It was St. Jacobs modification were minor. Yeah, it was Breslau where we're adding about 1,500 hectares difference between the raw approval and the regions and the provinces.
Thanks. And one more follow-up if I can. I understand the staging's kind of a deal breaker for us in theory. What is the actual mechanism to give us control in that staging? Is it our zoning? Is it our official plan? Is it just a new law from the province? What's the mechanism?
Again, through you, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So the mechanism is our official plan, and that's where our current policies reside, which have protected Elmira and St. Jacobs, and actually were implemented in Breslau a few years ago when we did the secondary plan. And we've held to them, and we've won at a board hearing about our staging policies. So implementing them in our official plan gives the guide. So when we update our official plan in 2024, as we're working through right now, we'd continue with those strong policies and improving them and setting those staging in place.
Other questions for staff? Councillor Koutoulakis.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Vink. Can you just speak a little bit to the amount of staff time that's been dedicated to the changes the province made? I know that there was some language in one of the announcements by the minister that he was hoping to make municipalities whole. What would that look like for Woolwich?
Through you, Mayor, again, to the Councillor Koutoulakis. Staff have reviewed some of the costs we have done with some of the consultants to date that we've retained. Some of the biggest costs have been with our engineering work in Breslau, which has been substantial, as well as some other projects that we've been contracts we've been working with to work through our official plan. But from a staff perspective, it's hard to measure the time because we did Breslau with internal in-house between myself and our manager of special projects, John Scarfone, as well as other staff helping to do mapping, etc. So ballpark, we're just probably under $500,000 that we probably incurred in costs between consulting studies and staff time, but I couldn't verify staff time for you easily. It's a ballpark number on the staff side that we kind of threw into there. So I'd say we're just under $500,000. Most of this coming out of development charges or staff, just staff times, hours.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Schwint.
One more follow-up that Mr. Koutoulakis brought up, and I was also asked this by a resident. We go ahead with this plan and manage the staging. How much additional staff time will be required to, I guess, oversee additional planning requirements we're putting ourselves to oversee this versus under the current Europa 6 guidelines and approval processes?
Ms. Breeze or Mr. Vink, who wants to take that?
I can answer.
So we are not coming forward with another staffing request for 2024 budget. We do feel that the staff that we have in our planning department right now would be able to handle this for the next few years. Ultimately, when we start to develop out a little bit further, we would need additional staff to deal with the development applications, but with the staged and phased growth, we think that we could handle it for the next few years.
Sorry, I didn't ask my question very well. You touched on it. That's helpful, but I'm curious, do you see a difference in staff resources required at the township level under either scenario? Like, are we taking on more, I guess, responsibility for oversight, which will require more time from the region? Or is it kind of the same amount of work?
Maybe I'll try answer. I don't foresee additional staff time as a result of this, doing the staging policies. We've done with them for years. It actually gives us controlled growth. It gives us a good answer to developers early on. It also sets the stage for developers. So it helps us to do that internally, and we don't need additional resources or timing. It's not going to change anything from a staffing perspective to review and give comment to an official plan question, because people could come in at any time and ask any kind of question and we respond back. So it's just another one of those questions. That's kind of the day-to-day kind of thing. So it wouldn't add additional staff time. If we were to go the other direction or should I say, if we had the province's approval to continue with the countryside line as it was, the concern is we might be overwhelmed by the number of plans of subdivision that were coming in. If the province hadn't reverted back or changed anything and didn't give us controls, we were worried about how fast growth is going to happen. And then we were going to potentially need some additional resources to try to keep up with potential growth. As we mentioned, if Breslau was to grow to 2051 to the boundaries of the countryside line, that would mean additional staffing and resources for sure.
Ms. Freese?
Yeah, sorry, that was Jeremy said what I said. It was a concern when the province had extended the boundaries to the countryside line without any phasing or staging. Then we were very concerned about staffing and the work as well, not just in the planning department, but in township wide.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to delegations then. And starting with Tom McLaughlin from Thomasfield Homes. Welcome, Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you. This is my first time back in front of the dais since COVID, so thanks for having me back.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Good evening, Mayor Shantz and members of council. My name is Tom McLaughlin. I'm the vice president at Thomasfield Homes. We are a family-owned business that's been building in Breslau for the past 20 years. And in Waterloo region for the past 45 years. About half of our employees live in the Breslau area and in Woolwich. And we employ roughly directly about 30 people, and indirect trades about 500, and indirect we probably add another 1,000 to 2,000 jobs to the region. So we're a big contributor of employment to Woolwich. And we've been building in Waterloo region for the past 40 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the township, township's response to the province regarding the winding back of the changes of the approved official plan. We support the staff's approach to the request that the minister use the countryside line that was implemented for the township on the modifications of the April 11th ministerial letter with the conditions as stated. Thomasfield owns a property at 2450 Victoria Street, which is on the northwest quarter of Greenhouse Road and Highway 7 in Breslau, and we provide a letter which is attached to the agenda. We've also have interest in the land located in the northeast corner of Fountain and Victoria Street, formerly known as the Smart Centers property. Further to the staff recommendation, we respectfully ask the township support the April 11th, 2023 modification and express that support to Minister Calandra. There is a severe shortage of family-based housing in the region. In this context, we respectfully have the two requests. The first request inclusion of our property, and the second is the continuation of the Breslau secondary plan to the countryside line boundary. This decision will have an impact on the region for the next 30 years. We have to consider the silent majority, those who want to raise their children in ground-related dwellings. We haven't considered the citizen who hasn't moved to the region, the young Canadian who hasn't formed families yet, the Canadian who hasn't yet to move to the country and realize the Canadian dream of owning a family, single family home or a family-based housing. This land is, this additional land is sorely needed. As I noted, we're in the middle of a generational housing supply challenge, and this is reflected in the high prices of homes in the region. Unfortunately, the only way to fix this is more supply, especially when it comes to low-rise housing. The approved land that, or the land that is approved is taking way too long to go from draft plan to building permits. The shift from buying from low density to high density is not due to market preference, but due to the overall planning policies in the region constraining low density supply. Context wise, it takes roughly about 10 years for development to come to full fruition. Ultimately, my interest in this process is for the future. At this pace, especially under the high density, low urban expansion, my children, my colleagues' children, my friends' children will not be able to afford a home in the region, whether it be from apartment or a single family home. Therefore, we'll lose all those people and those jobs to other locales that can provide these. The only way to fix, as I noted, the only way to fix this is more supply, especially in the single family home. Recognizing the current growth trends and the housing needs of the region, Waterloo, we respectfully ask that the township support the staff, we respectfully ask the township supports the staff recommendation, expresses this to the minister. Just in terms of demand, the Smart Prosperity Institute in 2021 released a new report regarding housing, new housing needs from 2021 to 2023. In Waterloo region, 62,000 new young families occupying low and medium densities will be formed in the region. This will be offset by 20,000 older families leaving existing low and medium density housing. The region's relatively young population ensures the general turnover will be low, and the medium density households will stay relatively modest into the middle of the century. That is a need for 42,000 homes over the next 10 years in Waterloo region. I know we won't be able to meet that demand, but we need to start trying. When you don't accommodate for growth, you're denying the Canadian dream for future Canadians and future generations. People will just move where their dream can be housed. We still believe that ground-related housing dwellings, including single-family homes, is the Canadian dream, and this is reflected in the market demand. I believe this is reflected in housing choices for the majority of council and most senior staff and the various special interest groups that will most likely speak today. If this boundary is walked back, it will not provide equitable and thriving, sustainable Waterloo. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm here to answer your questions.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? No, thank you. Our next delegate is Pierre Chauvin, Waterloo Regional Home Builders Association. Welcome. If you can press the button there so the green light goes on. Okay.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, members of the public in the audience. My name is Pierre Chauvin. I'm a planner and a partner at MHBC Planning. We're a consulting firm out of Kitchener. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Waterloo Home Builders Association. I'm not here on behalf of any particular property owner, but here on behalf of our 160 member company, member organization, which provides over 90% of our housing stock in our region and is over a $30 billion industry annually in our region. Our industry is committed to improving affordability and choice to the industry throughout. We certainly support the province's decision in April and the urban boundaries established through that decision in April. It more closely aligns with the provincial methodology in our opinion. Next slide, please. Just want to point out that a few key messages that we like to point out, some of which Mr. McLaughlin noted. But first and foremost, we certainly, as an industry, support increased density, particularly around transit. But it needs to be based on evidence-based market. And the density issue cannot respond to the supply issue alone. It's about providing market choice and providing all kinds and forms of housing, from single detached to mid-rises to high rises across the board, rental, ownership, etc. You've heard Mr. McLaughlin speak to supply being influenced by and influencing our pricing. We've heard about the housing crisis and the cost of housing. This is all driven by the lack of supply. We need more housing and we need to plan for it for the long term. There are also other housing indicators, which I'll speak to in the next slide, that have influenced sort of the land needs analysis. First and foremost, again, I should point out that our economy, we live in a great region, and our economy has prospered by this great growth. And the only way we can continue to do that is by providing housing for the long term. But there are some factors that have been certainly changing quite considerably in the last number of years, particularly in the last 7 years from 2016 to 2019. For example, inflow or in-migration of our population has grown considerably, particularly during in the age cohort between 15 and 34. This is the largest cohort that is the housing sort of consumers in our industry. This has been the largest growing inflow in the past 7 years. And from 2002 to 2015, that growth has always been around, that age cohort has represented about 63% of our inflow or in-migration to the region. That has grown in the last 7 years to over 77%. Or to put it another way, that annual growth over the last 11 years has been 300% more than it has been in the preceding 14 years. So it's a considerable amount of growth of immigration that's coming to this community. Why not? We are a great region. We are blessed with a great economy and a great place to live. Heard about out migration. There's also people coming in. There's also people out leaving. Within that same time frame, we know that out migration has been very low, and people again are staying here again. What is that happening? What is happening is that that is then displacing the need or within our urban areas to our rural areas for more housing, more low density housing, more mid-rise housing, and it's putting pressure on places such as Woolwich. And lastly, we've heard a lot about student housing, but I would like to talk about more international students and temporary foreign workers. Those are known as sort of non-permanent residents. So over the past 7 years in the region, we've seen the 6th highest years since 2002. Within the last year, 10,000 non-permanent residents have been added to the region. And where are those people living? That is the non-permanent residents have not been accounted for in the region's land needs assessment. There was actually an article produced not long ago in the Globe and Mail that reported from the CIBC that said that we are undercounting the total amount of non-permanent residents by over half. They reported that we have about 1 million in Canada. That means there's another 1 million people out there that still need housing. Next slide, please. Fundamentally, home buyers we know are demanding choice, and there's housing needs out there. There's needs for first-time buyers, long-term renters, students, seniors, all looking for condos, apartments, single detached homes, that first-time home buyer. What we need is a mix of everything. It can't just all be high-rise. It has to be a mix and variety and housing choice. And that is exactly what, by providing the lands that are identified by the province, will do. Next slide. So what we are recommending, again, we are recommending that the ROPA 6 is closer to fulfilling what is called option 1 from the region's growth analysis, as the other 2 options really fall considerably short of what the growth plan anticipated. We support the province's amendments, and we need, again, we look for the lower tiers to help us achieve the population and housing growth to meet our housing targets. And so last slide, please. I'll just close up by saying this is an opportunity to work together with not only the local tiers, but the government, the private sector, nonprofit. We are all part of this housing crisis, and to solve the housing crisis, we need to work together. And we certainly look forward to working together with the township. And we have submitted some documentation from our land needs economists, and we'd be happy to entertain further discussions with you if that is desired. So thank you for the time this evening, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, I'm not seeing any. Thank you. We've got your information here too, so.
Thank you.
Our next delegate is Dr. Barbara Schumacher, 50 by 30 Waterloo Region. Welcome, Dr. Schumacher.
Thank you. Good evening. Before I speak to the staff report regarding growth plans for Woolwich, I will make a few comments about the untenable position and unreasonable 45-day deadline forced upon our mayor, council, and staff that is the result of flip-flops in decision-making by our provincial government and disregard for democratic process and planning norms. I want to express my sincere appreciation to the staff for the energy and time they have committed to meet the expectation for expansion placed upon them just 6 months ago. I understand why they wish to build upon the work invested so far to comply with the provincial directives, and why in their report they propose asking for expansion to the countryside line, contingent upon also being given sole planning powers to stage development as they determine best for Woolwich. I wish to thank Mayor Shantz for seeking staff advice when she received the letter from Minister Calandra inviting her to consider growth beyond settlement borders. Mayor Shantz has the authority bestowed upon her by the minister, but she has chosen to follow a democratic process. Tonight, council will receive the staff report with delegations from the public. They will consider the issues and follow normal municipal processes for decision-making. This adherence to democratic principles I celebrate. Turning to the issue, what growth plan will Woolwich choose? In September 2022, Woolwich Council passed ROPA 6 unanimously, deciding to endorse the region plan, to develop residential and employment lands within settlement boundaries, to preserve our countryside line and protect our fertile farmland, water recharge areas, and wetlands. ROPA 6 was the result of years of extensive investigations, assessments, and consultations. It was significant that Indigenous leaders sent letters of support for ROPA 6. The 2,380 hectare settlement boundary expansion in Waterloo region was announced in April 2023, following the removal of parcels of land from the Greenbelt. We have learned through reports by the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner that the Greenbelt decisions were led by political staffers, seriously flawed, unsupported by any planning rationale, influenced by conflicts of interest, and without Indigenous or public consultation. All due process, democratic, and planning norms were abandoned. At this moment, RCMP are investigating and may lay charges. Is there any doubt that these same questionable practices were applied to the forced expansions of a number of municipalities and regions? If there was a question about integrity of the process, Minister Calandra, after his own review, announced that he was reversing the forced urban expansions because he was not convinced that the expansions were justified. Within days of reversing the forced expansions, Minister Calandra invited mayors to act unilaterally to do the very thing he reversed. Essentially, you, mayor and councillors, are being asked to act in support of decisions for which the provincial government is now under investigation. And you are put into the pressure cooker of a 45-day timeline because, as the government repeatedly reminds us, the solution to our housing crisis demands rapid response. I would argue the chaos caused for planners, developers, and the construction industry by the legislative changes, planning interference, and lack of attention to planning experts and the government's own advisory committees has caused challenges and delays to sincere efforts by municipalities to move quickly to approve development. Therefore, I ask this council and mayor to reject the staff recommendation and send a letter to the minister as the city of Waterloo has done. Confirm support for ROPA 6, decline expansion to the countryside line. How can we trust this government to keep their promises? Asking for sole planning authority to give you confidence that you will be able to stage development to the countryside line appropriately does not guarantee that the government will not reverse course. Developers will jump on the opportunity to build where they own land, not where planners find the public will be best served. Are you prepared to seek the experts and to pay the legal expenses to fight for the common good should developers take Woolwich to the Ontario Land Tribunal? You will have an opportunity in 3.5 years during the 5-year review to seek a carve out beyond your settlement boundaries if necessary. And at any time, there is the option of an MZO for development projects that are urgent. So you do have alternatives. Do not allow this deadline to force a decision which opens up a feeding frenzy for developers without any guarantee that the government will keep its promise to you. I am research lead for 50 by 30 Waterloo region. Therefore, I was looking for evidence of climate responsible planning when I read the report from Thomasfield Homes. There was no mention of how this company will help Woolwich reduce our carbon emissions. We need planning for increased energy efficiency, net zero housing, communities with increased density close to services and amenities. Thomasfield Homes does present an argument for low-rise single-family dwellings, in other words, business as usual. Their plan will escalate our emissions and make our climate goals unattainable. We know market forces and private interests will not solve housing affordability, and they will not solve climate breakdown either. Until this council has put in place requirements for green development standards, the wise course of action will be to hold the line, support ROPA 6, and prevent developers who are motivated to develop their land with the largest profit margin the market will bear from beating down the door of your planning department. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Schumacher? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Standing in the back, would you like a chair? Okay, I wasn't sure if it was on purpose or okay. Thanks. Our next delegate is Arthur Eby, Ebycrest Farms. Welcome, Mr. Eby.
Mayor Shantz and members of council. I am the president of Ebycrest Farms Limited. The farm has been in the family since 1900, and I have farmed the land for 53 years, and hope to continue on as long as I'm able. This land is a heritage, and I value it greatly, but the writing is on the wall as far as development is concerned. The land is surrounded by developers, Thomasfield on the south and Fieldgate on the east, the new Highway 7 to the north, and the Grand River on the west. And so this is like a hole in the donut or an island in the middle of the sea. It's isolated, and so the value of the land is such that farming will not be used for farming in the future because no one can afford to purchase the property. The southern part of the property is adjacent to Ebycrest Road and Highway 7, and it's an ideal area for the services to come from the south of Victoria Street through and service the rest of the land that is on the property. And so I'm just asking that you would consider including this property in the settlement area of Breslau. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Were there any questions? No, I don't see any. Thank you, Mr. Eby. Our next delegate is Kevin Thomason, Grand River Environmental Network. Welcome, Mr. Thomason.
Good evening, honorable mayors, councilors, and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, and I'm vice chair of the Grand River Environmental Network, a broad coalition of citizens and community organizations. For decades, we have worked on our visionary regional official plans, including working with the previous Woolwich Council that unanimously approved the ROP on June 6, 2022, with no urban boundary expansion and 0 acres of farmland loss here in Woolwich. It was devastating this past spring when Minister Steve Clark forced thousands of acres of unnecessary urban boundary expansion across Waterloo region with no data, no justification, and no rationale, overriding local democracy and strong support from every council in the region, threatening the future success of our ROP with its focus on complete 15-minute walkable communities, housing affordability, public transit, and farmland protection, and severely compromising our visionary countryside line concept by using up every single acre of land that was to last for generations. The Grand River Environmental Network, along with citizens and groups across the province, protested for months with rallies, lawn signs, phone calls, and thousands of emails, including several protests here in Woolwich, with great coverage of our serious concerns with the Ford government in local media. It was a tremendous victory for our community in October when the new housing minister backtracked and canceled these forced urban boundary expansions because of corruption concerns paralleling the provincial Greenbelt scandal. Minister Calandra admitted serious concerns about staff actions and how parcels had been selected by the government with no transparency, no data, and no public process. And while the Waterloo Home Builders Association claimed in their press release the provincially approved plans were part of an extensive, transparent, public stakeholder consultation process, Minister Clark's decision to override our ROP was final and binding, with no advance knowledge, no public consultation, no First Nations engagement, and he provided no data, rationale, or justification on how he arrived at his decision to go against the decision of this council, regional analysis, and expert research to open up so much of our local farmland for development. While we have no idea how the minister chose these lands, there is no development land shortage here in Waterloo region. We certainly don't want to get embroiled in provincial corruption scandals. We must do better and can easily avoid this quagmire. Hence why it is so concerning to see this Woolwich staff report recommending that you ask the province to reverse this land reversal. This council just approved 14 months ago the Sustainable Regional Official Plan that will meet and even surpass our housing targets without any of these forest lands that wouldn't even be coming on stream for decades, and do it more efficiently, more economically, and much faster than having to service and build distant greenfield communities from scratch. We have thousands of development lots already approved, and on average, only about 9% of approved lands in Waterloo region actually get developed each year. It isn't in the best public interest to see massive over-designations of development lands. When every acre is approved for development within the countryside line, whether it is needed or not, it fuels land speculation outside the countryside line, like we're already seeing, making land less affordable for everyone in the region. We're in a climate crisis. We can't afford to lose any more farms. We need to be building a greater variety of affordable homes close to the shops, schools, and services where people want to live, as we had already planned in the ROP. As you see here tonight, there's significant pressure from disappointed speculators and developers. However, approving all the lands within the countryside line destroys the entire concept. As staff admits, with only days now to respond to the minister, we don't have time to do all the land needs analysis and proper consultation to choose only some of the lands either. The Woolwich staff report before you tonight also has a massive but only if in it, with a long list of requirements from the province that, frankly, when the province hasn't even responded to many official plans, seem unlikely to ever be granted to Woolwich. Given the millions of dollars and years of battle the region has spent battling at the OMB, the OLT, and provincial courts, Woolwich would be foolish to take on all this without the needed experts on staff. This staff report makes clear, unless the province agrees to all these criteria, then it is recommended that ROPA 6 be implemented as previously approved for Woolwich and seek reimbursement from the province for the expenses recently incurred. We shouldn't rush tonight to make an irrevocable decision we can't take back. There is no land shortage. Our community hasn't changed dramatically in the last 14 months. We can surpass all of our housing targets more effectively, faster, and with a greater variety of housing choice and sustainability with the plans we already have. There will be a mandatory 5-year review of the ROP in just 3.5 years, where any adjustments, if needed, can be made with proper processes. All of this provincial waffling has already wasted much time and resources. We need to move forward with our ROP intact and focus on implementing its plans for affordable housing, the missing middle, complete walkable communities, and solutions for our climate crisis. Now is not the time for backtracking and furthering the corrupt decisions of the province and previous minister. Decisions so poorly made that the current minister doesn't even feel they meet the test of accountability. The City of Waterloo just unanimously passed a motion endorsing the regional official plan, proper planning processes, and keeping our ROP that receives so much community, business, and even First Nations support intact. It would be fantastic to see Woolwich Council lead again tonight with a similar motion. Please don't fall victim to the latest dubious provincial schemes that are bypassing proper planning processes, public engagement, consultation, and placing tainted decisions that no one can explain on your own shoulders. You know the province will be first to throw you under the bus if there are ever any future issues, just as they have already with several cabinet ministers and so much of their staff recently terminated. In conclusion, the province has admitted their errors, reversed the destructive forest boundary expansions, and restored our visionary regional official plan. We already have the progressive common sense plan we need for the future. Please ensure our regional official plan proceeds intact with no changes, as this council so strongly approved it just last year. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Koutoulakis.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the delegate. I recently watched a CTV News article that featured you in it. And at the end of that article, they had mentioned that there was an ongoing FOI request into provincial communications between certain developers. I'm just wondering, are you privy to that FOI request? And if so, can you speak to some of the questions that you're trying to have answered through that FOI request?
Yeah, good question. And really it comes out of the concerns we're seeing at the provincial level. And we've had to work with environmental groups, community groups, and citizen groups across the province to get the Greenbelt scandal exposed, to get these forced urban boundary decisions rescinded, to see things like the 3 rural severances, the absurd policy where the provincial government was going to chop all our farmlands up with 12+ homes and driveways and septic systems and water systems. And there's just been so many absurd planning things that have come that are not actually going to add to the housing we need in this province, but are simply instead seemingly more to pander to specific interests or the profits of individuals over the greater public good. We've watched community groups in other communities expose a lot of these truths and find out some fascinating information and bring forward a lot of light through these investigations, Auditor General requests the Integrity Commissioner look into things and such. And indeed, earlier this week, there was a united group of community groups and environmental organizations here in our community launch FOI requests on several municipalities where we've seen mayors receive extensive campaign donations, more than 50% of all their donations from the development community. And simply the question we're asking is some of these troubling patterns we see that are influencing decisions in other areas happening here? We don't know. We've never done anything like this in our community before. Frankly, Waterloo region has been very lucky to avoid a lot of the land speculation that the rest of the province has faced, because we've always made it very clear that our rural townships will remain rural. It is staggeringly disappointing and challenging when I travel to work with groups in other communities and places like the county of Brantford or Simcoe County, where 42% of one county and 43% of the other county is owned by foreign land investment corporations. When 43% of your community is owned by Japanese and German investors, it is hoping to make profits. It is not necessarily in the best interest of your citizens. We've been very lucky here in Waterloo region by setting these long-term planning expectations with things like our countryside line that is designed to guide growth to avoid a lot of these foreign speculations. But things have changed very recently and very rapidly. By Ford opening up the Greenbelt, we saw over $250 million of land purchases within the Greenbelt this summer alone. We just heard a farmer stand here at this podium a few minutes ago talking about a farmer that farmers could not even afford to buy his farm anymore because land speculators have driven up the prices so much. We have seen just in Wilmot Township in the last month, 3 farm parcels purchased by foreign land speculators. These are new things to our region. Things are changing, and we can't underestimate the development pressures we're going to be seeing moving forward. I think that's one of the reasons why we need to be very careful on what we take on. And if Woolwich is going to take on the long-term planning and think that you can stage and phase all these things so accurately, you're going to be prepared to stand back and defend a lot of interests. We've seen the region fight for years at the OMB, OLT, divisional courts for millions and millions of dollars to try to defend our regional official plans. It's very scary to think that Woolwich wants to take that all on yourselves, particularly when we already have a fully approved ROP and a region willing to work together on that, particularly when we've already seen the city of Waterloo step forward and unanimously vote with their council just a week or two ago to support the ROP and the plan and our regional official plan intact.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Eby is our next delegate. Welcome, Mr. Eby number 2.
Yes. No direct relation, I'm sure.
I
But we're
was
linked
told-
back in the 1800s.
I was going to say, I was told a number of years ago to be careful when you say that, because with a name like Eby, you probably are.
Precisely. Mayor Shantz and members of council, my name is Kevin Eby. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professional planner by trade. I'm also a professional land economist. I live in Waterloo, but I have great interest in Woolwich and the other townships and the cities because I was the director of community planning for 15 years at the region of Waterloo and was responsible for overseeing the official plan that created the countryside line, the protected countryside, et cetera, that you're all grappling with these days. I'd like to start out by saying I sympathize with staff very much. You've been caught in a whirlwind of chaos that's been created by this government. They keep changing the rules. They keep changing how things are to move forward. And quite frankly, if their goal was to actually build more houses, they're going about it almost exactly the wrong way. And I think, staff, I cannot imagine being in their position these days. And so I want to be clear, I'm not speaking against what staff are saying here, but I'm not supporting it. And it does not surprise me that they came forward with what they did. I also want to express sympathy for the council and particularly the mayor, who you have a situation where the government has implemented a tainted process, has stepped back from it, and now is asking you to kind of re-endorse it through a process which charitably at best could be called tainted in itself. And it's baffling. To a great degree, it's almost like democracy in Ontario just isn't important anymore, at least to the provincial government. The bottom line in all of this, there is plenty of land. There is plenty of land in the region of Waterloo. There is plenty of land in Ontario to meet both the 2031 housing targets and the 2051 forecasts in the planning horizon. There is no question about that. The studies exist. I've done significant review of both here locally and throughout the province. And we're not short land. I think the real issue for you is, the Regional Official Plan Amendment number 6 was created through a robust consultation process that involved hundreds of people and hundreds of meetings and approximately 2 years. There was consultation with organizations, there was consultations with First Nations, and there was strong support from the community. What you're being asked to do here is to override all of those voices by simply, a resolution of your council. Kudos to Mayor Shantz, at least it's before you. The minister didn't even ask for your endorsement of any recommendation she brought forward, which is just, it's absurd that it's come to this in Ontario. So my recommendation to you is to strongly support ROPA 6 as it was adopted by Regional Council. There is no question that it was endorsed by the community. It was endorsed 15-1 by Regional Council. There wasn't a single objection coming forward from any of the local municipalities. And to vote to override that, through this process, one meeting tonight where 3 people from the public show up and 5 developers, do you really want to be left with that as partly all of our legacy? The other thing that I think is really critical for me personally is, we've worked hard on reconciliation with the First Nations. If you read the last couple pages of the submission we made, it shows that First Nations were actively engaged with the ROP review and came out of it more supportive than I have ever seen of a municipal process in my entire career. And then the minister just makes a decision without even consulting with them. And you're being asked to do exactly the same thing. And, we recognize the First Nations at the beginning of meetings all over Ontario, but when it comes to making the kinds of decisions that are really important to them, we tend to walk away. We didn't in the region of Waterloo. We consulted with them. We made changes that were important to them in order to make sure that we properly represented their views, and they gave kudos to regional staff and regional council through letters that are attached to the submission I made. And so Dr. Schumacher and Kevin Thomason said lots of things that I would otherwise say up here, but I'll save you the agony of having to listen to them all. And I'll just stress, I think you're at a decision point. Are we going to go down the road where this government is taking us, where consultation isn't important, we're jamming things down people's throats through what otherwise are tainted processes are acceptable, or are we going to say no? And my recommendation to this council, and I'll make the same recommendation to every council I get the opportunity to speak in front, is no. I really think we're at a point where we've got to defend the good planning that Waterloo region, small R region, is known for. I think that's critical. I think we've got to be in a position to support the First Nations consultation that's occurred. And I think the people who spoke at length through 2 years of the ROP review process deserve better than just to have it overridden through a process like this. And on that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you. Council, are there questions? Councillor Grant.
Thank you, through you to the delegate. Thank you very much for coming forward to speak and kind of extending that to the rest of the audience today too. I really appreciate the different perspectives. I'm just wondering, from the perspective of your professional planning and then economist view, what was the justification, if you know, for the lands selected by ROPA versus the province? If there was, I know there was a consultation process, but how do we go about selecting the lands that we do when we do an official plan like this?
Well, I think when I would have trouble speaking specifically for what regional planners did, although I must admit I'm fairly well up to speed with it. I think the key thing is that the regional planners recognize that with the recommendation for a 61% intensification rate, that solving our housing problems they're not going to be solved by building single detached units way out in the outside of the community. There was a report released today by the Alliance for Livable Ontario that identified the types of housing that are needed to address the affordable housing issue. And first and foremost was 300,000 one-bedroom apartments that rent for under $1,100. We are not going to achieve that type of housing by adding more land. And regional staff recognize that when they pushed a high intensification target. And it was also a target which we've been meeting. We've been, since 2006, we've been somewhere in the range of about 58% intensification. But that's the type of housing that we need. We don't need more land. And in fact, even in the greenfield, just to help justify what regional staff did in not selecting more, it was mentioned earlier that only about 9% of approved units in the greenfield are built every year. And that sounds crazy, but it's true. We have every year since 2006, we've averaged 19,000 approved dwellings in the greenfield areas, over 8,000 of which are single detached units. And yet we build on average 1,700 or about 9%. We build about 11% of all the single detached units that are approved every year. And if you look at ground related units, which are single, semis, and townhouses, we have approximately 14,500 approved units in plans of subdivision consistently, like remarkably consistently. And yet we're building less than, of those particular ones, probably around 1,100 to 1,200. So regional staff looked at the numbers. They realized that what was critical was intensification in order to meet the affordable housing component. They looked at what exists within our existing land out in the urban area. And at the end of the day, they decided on 150 hectares that were needed as part of ROPA 6. And quite frankly, I'm one of the people who pushed for some land to be required in the townships, because quite frankly, the townships are the ones that are going to be facing the major challenges in the future, because you have such a high percentage of single detached units. As your population ages, they're going to have somewhere to go. And unfortunately, in most of the townships right at the moment, the only place to go as they get older and can't live in singles anymore will be Kitchener or Waterloo. And so we looked at recommending an additional 150 hectares to be split among the townships to be used to try and round out some of the communities, but also specifically to look at seniors housing, because that's what we need. We don't need more single detached homes on new land. We have over 10 years worth of approved development in the greenfields. We have probably 25 years worth of plans of subdivision in the inventories that are being processed. The new land that we're talking about coming on, the odds of it actually coming forward to have any impact on affordability in the near or medium term is very low, if not almost zero. So I think I gave more of a speech than answer your question, and I apologize for that, but I'm passionate about this, as you can tell. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I do have a question.
And I'll be short in my answer, I promise.
I'll try to make it one that you can answer quickly then. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you that we've got lots of houses and apartments and all kinds of things approved that are sitting there. And you know, the answer to that is probably some kind of a sunset clause, but that's not my question. My question is about the countryside line, because you said you were involved with setting the countryside line. So could you tell me when that was set? What was the thinking behind it and what's the purpose of it?
Yeah. The countryside line was an interesting process. Basically, we started out with the environmentally sensitive landscapes that you know, there's one in the Northwest. In fact, you have some within your municipality. There's others down in the North Dumfries area, et cetera. We then found ourselves as the largest municipality in North America, dependent primarily on groundwater. We designated the regional recharge area on the Waterloo Moraine. And what we began to realize fairly quickly was between the environmental areas and the recharge area, what we actually had were an awful lot of land that we shouldn't be going into, and that we wanted to establish a boundary that would be the outside edge of any future urban area. And as we worked it around the municipalities, like the various urban areas, the intent was as much to say, on this side of the line, you can't go, as it was to say, on this side of the line, you can. It was never necessarily intended that everything inside the countryside line would be developed. It's like, maybe some of you have heard the reference to the white belt in the Toronto area, which is basically the area between the green belt and the urban areas of, you know, that dominate along Lake Ontario. And people have it in their head that because it's between the two, it automatically is going to be, you know, urban at some point. That's not the case. The intent is that it's what we created inside the countryside line was effectively an inventory that could be drawn on in the future as we needed. And we weren't even sure whether we would ever get to the outside edge, to the actual countryside line, because we were pushing, you know, transit, light rail transit, we were pushing intensification massively. But what we wanted to do was to make sure that we had enough potential if we needed it to accommodate growth in the future, and that the expansions out into it would be done carefully, and that we would make sure there was appropriate justification. And in fact, we applied policy in that intervening gap that effectively is the same as the rural areas, the prime agricultural lands or whatnot. So it was not ever intended that it would just automatically all be urban. That was never the intent. It was to be a resource we could draw on when we needed it. And the other purpose of the countryside line was really to try and limit speculation on the agricultural lands. We were facing agricultural land values rising to the point that young farmers had no hope of buying land. And so by putting a permanent, at least a line on the map that said we're not going beyond there, it was really, you know, the combination of those two things is how it came about. And I've heard somebody say recently that it came about from a bunch of environmentalists. It didn't. It came about because 6 people sat in my office one day and said, how are we going to deal with these pressures in a responsible manner? And it was one of the proposals that we took to council and to all of the local councils, and it was supported quite strongly by the political side, but also the community.
Thank you. Our next delegate is Mike Gilles. Welcome, Mr. Gilles.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, councilors and staff. I have a graphic, I believe. Show. Yes, so my name is Mike Gilles and I represent myself here tonight along with Mr. Richard Frede. We are owners of 1634964 Ontario. We are local. We have owned property in the north end of St. Jacobs for over 20 years. We have been an active participant in the municipal process over the years to develop our lands, which are earmarked for residential use in the official plan. Our property consists of 4.7 acres on Northside Drive in St. Jacobs, all of it within the settlement boundary, and it's all fully serviced. Additionally, we have 10 acres of developable land to the west, all within the countryside line, which is shown in red at the railway tracks. These are lands that were included in the province's approved boundaries announced last April. The woodlot to the north is also our property, which will remain untouched. 2 of the 4.7 acres were brought into the settlement boundary through the rationalization process in 2017. And that enabled us to proceed with our plan to develop those 4.7 acres of infill property. And our plan has been consistent before and since then, and that is to provide much needed seniors housing. We know there is a high need for seniors who want to downsize but want to remain in their community. And that has been our objective all along. Our plan includes construction of a municipal street, which will provide connection to future development to the lands to the west. We've reviewed this with staff and feel this is the best long-term solution. Our development is designed to accommodate a 160-bed seniors care facility, which has been approved by the Ministry of Health for St. Jacobs. This facility would be provided with full services using existing infrastructure. So for the past 3 years, we have invested in development studies for development approvals, geotechnical, hydrogeological. We've actually done 2 years of groundwater monitoring as required, archaeological, environmental, stormwater, sanitary servicing studies and surveys. Through the process, it's become clear that our project requires some additional land outside of the current settlement boundary in order to be feasible. In reality, the April 2023 announcement by the province provided some much needed clarity. It provided clarity for us on our ability to utilize some existing lands, and it provided clarity on the ability to utilize the investment that we were going to be making in the initial phase of the project. Obviously, the October decision reverses all of that, potentially putting our project on hold, stopping it in its tracks, and losing some valuable opportunities. It also became clear in the process that working on a broader scale, I think Jeremy used the word holistic, considering future phases of development in our planning, it's more cost effective, it's better planned, and it's less disjointed. The countryside line to the west, in our view, is the most logical location for a comprehensive and well thought out development plan for these lands. And so we are prepared to work with our neighbors and the township in a collaborative effort to ensure that important housing and important services for seniors are built in St. Jacobs. So we therefore respectfully ask for council to support option 2 to move forward with the province's approved boundaries. So thank you for your consideration. I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? I have a question for staff before you go, if I can, just on this particular project, the turnaround is outside of the urban area. What would have to happen if we go back to ROPA 6? What would have to happen to make that a reality? Like just process wise, if you can just give us an idea of what the difference might be with the two options.
So if we revert back to the province, the region's approval, we'd probably move everything back into the settlement boundary line for now, because we'd be presupposing, like, we wouldn't want to impact the agricultural side, and we shouldn't be developing the urban stuff in the agricultural portion outside the settlement boundary. So we'd probably be moving everything back into the boundary lines that are existing today in that top end. Obviously, if we went with the province's guide proposal, then we would have no issue here, and they'd be proceeding to develop up to the rail line that exists.
So if we wanted to put that turnaround in, what would have to be the process to do that? I'm just trying to understand, because that's part of the nuance of what we're gonna, what we're trying to talk about here.
So to bring the actual, just the turnaround in, a modification to the boundary line would have to be presented to the province to have them make that adjustment, to show that, to allow that flexibility, or some specific policy, rather than just saying that only the turnarounds allowed to temporarily, for example. It doesn't need necessarily amend the boundary. They have to have a policy in place in ROP to allow that, maybe in the interim for the next, I don't know, 20 years, let's say, until we grow out, as two potential solutions. But we need some sort of understanding and approval, because generally speaking, we don't allow the turnarounds outside of the boundaries.
So an application would have to be made to the province?
Yes, we'd have to
do
somehow
that?
work with the boundaries. This is where the boundaries are taking place. So we have to do that through ROPA 6 to acknowledge that. So with the province right now, that's where we'd have to be dealing with that, is we'd have to bring that to them.
Assuming Bill 23 gets proclaimed. Otherwise, we'd have to go to the region. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
who knows?
But under this process, at this point, Madam Mayor, so just at this point, because the province is asking us, where do you want to move the lines? Essentially, everything's in front of you today as council. Where do you want to move that line, and to give those specifics? You could do a specific area request here or there, or another one, for example, and bring that to the province as part of this request right now in the 45 days.
I'm under no illusion that because we make a recommendation, that's going to be implemented. Ms. Freese.
No, I was just gonna say, if you choose the option to revert back to the original settlement line approved in the ROP, and that roundabout or any development is outside of that land, we would not be able to consider it. It would be off the table. All development, including the roads and the roundabouts and any lots, would have to be within the settlement boundary. We don't want to presuppose that we would be developing any in future into any lands outside of the settlement area.
Okay. Councillor Schwinn.
This is a minor technical one, but the light blue triangle and square is on both sides of the settlement line. What does that area represent?
It's just the preliminary location for stormwater management.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Our next delegate is Stuart Martin. Welcome, Mr. Martin, and you just saw his parcel of land adjacent to Mr. Gilles.
I'm Stuart Martin, a longtime farmer in Woolwich Township, one of the neighbors that Mike was referring to. Just put up a little letter here. I am writing regarding the property at 52 Hawksville Road, which is 24 acres immediately to the west of the Calvary United Church lands and immediately south of the Gilles Frede lands. Our family has owned these 24 acres for the past 60+ years. For many years now, we have known that the lands would soon be used to provide homes for families. As farmers, we recognize that land is required to be taken out of agriculture production in order to provide housing for our growing community. Land is required to provide the needs for large employers in St. Jacobs such as Home Hardware, and land is required to build churches. The good thing is that crop yields have doubled per acre over the last decades, and so we are fortunate to continue to be able to provide the crops which are needed along with the housing and jobs. The Township of Woolwich supported, including 24 acres of land inside the countryside line many years ago, when the province of Ontario made the decision this past April to move forward to bring our 24 acres into the St. Jacobs settlement area. Now it made good sense to us. I do believe the land surrounding Calvary United Church to the west and to the north are best organized and planned at one time. This past summer, we moved to sell to the local Schlegel family, whom we believe will make a positive neighborhood with the land. Schlegels began working immediately to get studies and reports underway. Being in the business of farming, we replaced the land with the purchase of farmland to the north. This latest uncertainty, which has been caused by the province's October announcement, is causing us significant difficulties. We fail to see the purpose of turning back on the provincial decision from April, as it really is a decision that respects the township's already laid out plans, as well as to use this land to provide housing. Moving ahead now allows that the best coordinated plans can be made for all lands in the area west and north of Calvary United Church, which we believe serves a very worthwhile planning purpose. We understand that the province has now asked for the guidance of Woolwich. We therefore request that our 24 acres of land continue to be included now within the buildable area for St. Jacobs, so that there is certainty and that we may all continue to move forward with the decisions which have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Martin? No. Thank you for coming in. Vaughn Bender, Schlegel Urban Developments. Welcome, Mr. Bender.
Thank you. Could I have the first graphic on the screen? Thank you, Mayor Shantz and members of council. I'll complete the story that has been begun by our neighbor, Mike Gilles, and the Frede lands to the north. The lands that we have recently entered into agreement on with the Stuart Martin family. And I think perhaps we can see that that plan up on the screen. My name is Vaughn Bender. I'm with Schlegel Urban Developments. We are a local Kitchener-based family business. We have not been building communities in Woolwich as of yet, but we look forward to doing that in the years ahead. We did enter into an agreement and purchased the St. Jacobs Farmers Market lands from the Shantz family back in 2018. And so we have been very proud to keep that a much loved community asset operating and really promoting the urban-rural interface, which I think our Woolwich and Waterloo region community is so proud of. And something really which this discussion tonight is about ways to balance that and maintain that going forward. So I'm specifically here tonight regarding the 24 acres that Stuart just spoke about and moving forward to continue to include that lands as per the provincial decision in April and allow us to continue to move forward with the work that we've begun. Just a bit of background, the lands were previously identified as mentioned as a future expansion area for St. Jacobs. The province made the modifications in April, as we know, to advance the lands. Based on the certainty of that decision, we reached an agreement with the Stuart Martin family. We began archaeological, natural heritage, geotechnical, engineering, planning background work, all commenced and in some cases completed already in the last several months as an investment in studies and reports to ultimately accompany future formal planning applications and advancing orderly development. As noted in this, if we could move to the second slide, as noted in this graphic, the Stuart Martin lands are not distant outlying lands. They really represent orderly and logical rounding out of the North St. Jacobs Village community area. Inclusion now of the Stuart Martin lands allows for the ability to complete neighborhood design for both these lands and the adjoining Gilles Frede lands, which were spoken about by Mr. Gilles. Providing an opportunity for us all to do well-planned master planning and completion of coordinated road and trail linkages, park and open space planning, development of a range of mix of housing options for all ages and stages, be it seniors, young families, children with children, and empty nesters. The above shared objective is all best accomplished, we submit, by advancing the good work which is underway with the adjoining landowners. Servicing for the Stuart Martin lands is available at the doorstep at Hawksville Road. The regional wastewater and water monitoring report from 2023 indicates capacity to serve an additional 680 additional people in the sewage treatment plant today. Schlegel Urban Developments has a proven track record of working collaboratively with our municipal partners and neighboring landowners to achieve the type of master plan community design which we believe is in order for St. Jacobs and these lands. We subscribe to orderly, urban adjacent stage development and are proven builders of 15-minute neighborhoods. The Stuart Martin property we respectively submit represents the orderly fulfillment of a long-standing, well-planned urban adjacent community and allows for this area to be completed in a coherent way within the village of St. Jacobs. It also does contribute to addressing the housing needs of our community. So our request is that you continue to move forward with this particular area of the North St. Jacobs community as you consider responding back to the provincial request. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions? No, I don't see any. Thank you. Okay, I'll ask the clerk, are there other people who would like to speak today?
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. I can tell you that since the agenda was published, we've had one letter submitted to council. I circulated to council and we will include it in the revised agenda package after the meeting for the public record. Just for the record tonight, it is from Polo Corp, which is developer of lands in Waterloo region. And sort of in summary, they support the provincially approved settlement boundary that the province provided on April 11th, as outlined in option 2 of the staff memo. I have also heard that there's additional members of the audience that have made a request to speak. If council wants to do that under section 64 of your procedural bylaw, you'd have to pass a resolution to allow unregistered delegations. And the time set out for the procedural bylaw for that is slightly shorter at 5 minutes.
Councillor Cadeau, moved by Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that's carried. You want me to just ask for hands? Okay, who else would like to speak? Yes, come on up. Just state your name and any affiliation for the record, please.
Good evening. Name is Jonathan Koutoulakis. I'm here on behalf of my colleagues at Madwest Breslau Limited. I'm here to express our support for the staff's recommendation, specifically endorsement of option 2 to maintain the provincial modifications as originally approved. We extend our sincere appreciation for the tireless efforts invested by Woolwich staff in advancing the secondary plan works resulting from provincial modifications. In alignment with our shared commitment to responsible and sustainable development, we find merit in the staff's recommendation. Controlled growth, as emphasized in option 2, is a principle we wholeheartedly endorse, recognizing its potential to yield positive outcomes for both our organization and the community at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there questions? I have a question. So your particular land, I think is included in ROPA 6. So either boundary doesn't really affect your particular development, but you're supporting the idea of controlled growth. Is that, yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, staff. John Mesina, 165 Bloomingdale Road. We've been trying to develop this piece of parcel. It's about 3 acres for 35 years. And continually gets shot down. It has all the services and everything on it. So I stand in the crowd and I listen to big developers chewing up big lands, and then retired planners telling us that we should be looking at smaller parcels, infill parcels, parcels that are meant to be developed. And we continually look over them. I'd like staff to really take a look at these smaller parcels throughout your entire community and relook at that before you start chewing up all the farmlands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Come on up.
Mayor Council, my name is Delmer Martin. I was here a couple of weeks ago, if you could recall, and I didn't register because I just found out about what was happening today by browsing the web. And I feel really passionately after listening to everybody so far that I was involved watching the township leading up to this ROPA or the official plan every step of the way. And I also watched the region by viewing all the meetings. And in both cases, unlike what has been said so far, option 2, which was something that staff had recommended to township and regional staff had recommended to the region. In both cases, option 2 was taken by the previous council. It was not this council. I think Mayor was there, but that was a previous council. So now what I'm saying is I also witnessed what's seemed like the very last meeting or two, people from out of town showed up. And an option 4 came to the table here in Township. I watched the meeting and it was adopted at the end of that meeting, just like that. And then I watched it go to region just a few months later, and lo and behold, this option 4 that had never been heard of. No staff had ever recommended it for years of consultations that I personally watched. And so I have no axe to grind. I'm not getting anything from the province. I'm not losing anything, but I just think that we need to be a lot more focused on truth and common sense. And we need to mind our own business. And we need to look after our own business. And people need to have a little bit more respect for everybody that's in Elmira and everybody that's in the township. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Thank you very much. I want to say that I really appreciate all of the input tonight. This is, as everyone has already said, it's a very quick suggestion, a recommendation that needs to go to the province, and we'll have some discussion around the table after hearing everyone, and then we'll get a letter ready to send to the province. So, Councillor Schwinn.
I guess starting with questions, I forgot about this question earlier for staff. We received a letter from the minister. Have there been any follow-up conversations with ministry staff about what the province may or may not entertain and recommendations from municipalities like ourselves?
I haven't had any staff. Jeremy, Mr.
At this point in time, staff haven't. The only opportunity to dialogue seems to be through the mayors as they're asking. So staff haven't reached out to have that dialogue at this point in time, and we haven't had opportunity to. So just even trying to pull this memo together last week without going through its proper processes. So no, we haven't had that dialogue yet.
Any other comments, Councillor Koutoulakis?
Too many. I mean.
Okay, we'll move on then. No.
Yeah, you might want to. The comment period of 45 days is really something that I struggle with, because the more time I spend on this file, the more it smells. So it's almost as if the 45 days is a ploy to really just shove this down our throat and make us accept something like this. And that rubs me the wrong way. I'm going to share 2 facts that I wrote down with the rest of council here. Fact number 1, RCMP are investigating this province for their handling of the Greenbelt. That is a fact. Another fact, Minister Calandra has shared one of the reasons for winding back this process is because he saw some of the same flaws. How can we even sit here and discuss whether or not we should send this back to the province and say, thanks, but no thanks? And that's where I stand on this. I don't want any process in the province shoving this down our throat with no consultation. It's the wrong process. I stand against it firmly.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I agree with Nathan. I don't like the way this process has been handled, and personally, I would go back to ROPA 6. I think it was put together for a reason, to protect the countryside line, to develop in a controlled fashion. As Kevin Eby has said, there was a lot of work went into it, and I will go back to ROPA 6. That's where I stand on this.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I also really struggle with this position. I greatly appreciate staff's work, and I do not envy the back and forth that they've had the experience and the chaos they experienced. It's in no way a fair position they've been put in by the province, but I do think that we should be honoring the local contribution and the local support that went into the discussions around ROPA 6. So I really feel that at the end of the day, local decisions should be made by the locals and not something that the province is pushing down. And we, as Councillor Koutoulakis had said, we know that there is an entire criminal investigation going on into the province's decisions behind the Greenbelt. And I really struggle to tangentially endorse their decision because of a ploy of a 45 days. So I'm just going to speak in support again of going back to ROPA 6.
Just to, sorry, and I'm supposed to chair and not get into this, but I think it's more of a conversation tonight than a normal debate. I think we need to be careful not to convolute this with the Greenbelt. I think it's two separate pieces, and although Councillor Cadeau is absolutely right in the facts that he presented, I want to try and focus on what we need here to make our planning work. And so what I'm struggling with a little bit is I understand the point that's been made about if we go back to ROPA 6, the boundaries are tighter, but we've also been able to, even with the tight boundaries, control growth within that. So I'm a little bit, I'm still a little bit torn as to which way to go.
I think a lot of my fear when we talk about option 2 that staff has brought forward for us is I'm really uncertain about whether the province will even accept our staged growth approach. And I'm not quite willing to make the gamble on that in that perspective.
I'm not sure they'll accept whatever we put forward as we put it forward either. I've always been afraid that they're going to take away our ability to control growth. I think that was part of comments that were made before. So if that's the case, then yeah, I go back to ROPA 6 in that. Councillor Schwint.
Okay. So I'm agreeing with what I'm hearing from the other councillors about the process. The province has made a mess of this. No matter what we decide, it's not going to be as effective a planning process as what would have been done without fluctuations, and Mr. Vink called it, and flip-flops. So, but some stuff runs downhill, and it's run downhill to us, and we have to deal with it. We can't abdicate our responsibility because we don't like what our higher ups did. So I want to make the best of a bad situation. So first off, I want to say kudos to Mayor Shantz for bringing this forward to us to have a public debate versus just writing a letter, which the minister gave her permission to do. So that's a good thing. My default position is local control is best in planning processes. I've got less faith in the region than I do in our council and our staff. I've got even less confidence in the province. So let's keep as much control as we can here. We're at a risk of MZO orders and OLT tribunal hearings no matter what. If we have no growth and stick to the boundaries, developers will appeal. If we open up too far, we're going to get appeals on the other side. Again, I'd rather have our staff defend our own decisions versus decisions made by the region or the province. Balance is one of my key fundamentals in life, and we're going to see growth in this province, in this township, whether we like it or not. We have to prepare for that. And when I look at the 3 settlement boundaries, the St. Jacobs one, very important to 2 or 3 landowners, but it's just a rounding error in the scheme of things. So I can't say it's going to detract from the environment. Elmira is more significant, but when you look at the boundaries of Elmira, it's not a huge increase over 25 or 30 years. So why wouldn't we start planning and allocating that land now to do it effectively? Breslau is a wild card. That's a massive increase, but look where it is. We need employment lands. We know there's going to be growth in Waterloo region. That's probably where it's going to be. Why not give staff the opportunity to get ahead of it and plan as well as they can, knowing it's a 30 to 50 year process, not a 5 or 10 years if we stage it. Councillor Grant talked about she's not convinced that the province will give us staging control. I'll take that one step further. If they won't give us staging control, they're not going to get us permission to go back to ROPA 6, because that's going even further than what they're going to admit. So to me, this is their best opportunity to control their own destiny, so to speak. It's gonna take work on our behalf, but I think we as council should endorse option 2. It's got warts, but it gives us control to do the best thing for our residents.
Anyone else? Ms. Freeze.
So I just wanted to respond to those comments through you, Madam Chair. So we really do see this as an opportunity to look out for the best interest of Woolwich. We have a secondary plan process. We have an official plan process. They do involve a consultation. They do involve planning for the development, including Indigenous consultation. So to say that we're just adding these lands without any thought process to it is not the way that we want to go with either. We're looking at a very comprehensive plan for the area. We want to plan for a community in Breslau, and adding a little bit of land piecemeal through MZOs or through minor adjustments to the area doesn't give us that opportunity to plan for that comprehensive plan for the area and really create that community, accommodate those large employment needs, economic development opportunities, the housing needs that we see for Woolwich, not necessarily for the region, but for Woolwich and what Woolwich wants to see. And then also be able to accommodate those like a trail network, active transportation, community areas, soft services, recreational services, and to be able to comprehensively plan for those in Breslau. And the only way we can do that is if we have that land there. We fully agree that it needs to be staged, needs to be phased. It can't happen all at once, but the only way we can plan for that is by having the area and being able to put that secondary planning process in place and that official plan process in place.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, but based on sort of the densities that we're looking at going forward in Breslau in particular, how long would it take to build out to say the current urban boundary?
Trying to remember because I've done this work in the past like 6 months ago. And you'll probably see some of that come in the Madwest recommendation report when it comes forward. So what's left in the boundary today, the current boundaries is Madwest subdivision, part of the Empire subdivision, and lands north of Victoria Street. So we probably have enough land in those areas to take us to 2030, somewhere in the 2030s easily off the top of my head. I can't give you exact dates, but definitely plenty of opportunity in the next while, just even in those lands, meeting our 55 people and jobs per hectare and exceeding them. And we'll have more growth, like I said, more growth over time. So, but controlling and understanding that growth, because like I think we mentioned with Breslau's, we're struggling with where that core area should be, where those trails should be in those connections. How do we build that transit? How do we integrate the airport into that future growth boundaries and some of the employment lands? So how do we bring that all together in a comprehensive plan and do that sustainably and environmentally, and as well as in the interim protecting the agricultural stays agricultural till we need it? Just how do we balance that? And that is the challenge that we're going to struggle with, no matter which route you go. But as Councillor Swint noted, and what staff is saying is let Woolwich control Woolwich's future, hopefully.
Ms. Freeze, you and I had a conversation earlier about how we could control the timing of growth. Can you speak to that?
Yep. So we have density targets that we would be implementing for any future residential land. We have the phasing and the staging policies that would be part of the official plan as well. And we can choose to how we designate that land, whether we designate it as a residential designation or whether it's a future development designation. So we would still require those official plan amendments, local official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments to develop any of that land. And that's where we can really have our staging and phasing policies to control what gets developed and when.
And do we do that now?
We do have phasing and staging policies in our official plan right now that we do use, and we have limited number of units that can be developed each year. So it has worked. Jeremy did speak to this earlier, and he could speak to it again as well. But I think he said since 1992 there that we've been using those.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, just to add to that. So like, since 1992, we've been doing that in Elmira and St. Jacobs. And how we do that is we use the population targets. So the population targets that have been assigned to us, and we've determined what's appropriate for growth. We then take that and determine and use those, that target along with the densities we're looking at and the lands that we see a need where the logical extension of servicing takes place in the next step, or things that are key priorities, like maybe trying to encourage a transit connection or a road connection that we need, and trying to build that together to connect the community the best way over time. So using those population targets actually sets the stage for how we grow. Like that's that's where we're going to use and say if we're going to hit a population target, let's say Elmira has always had a population target, let's say 17,000 at one point, and to achieve that over the next 10 years, we've said we needed 366 people per year. And we set aside growth for intensification out of that, and then we set aside the rest for greenfield. So that's how we've always done that split, and it has worked significantly well in the past 20 some years. So we would continue with that approach of what's our target in Breslau, what's our target in Elmira, how many people do we need to achieve that target, and what lands then do we need to bring on stream?
So the lands are essentially labeled as current development, future development, future development.
Yes, essentially we would label them and we number them in the plan. We'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can't get to 5 until 4 is gone. You can't get into 4 until 3 is basically being developed. So we set timelines to them, like we estimate we'll be in 3 by 2050 or whatever. So we set those targets. We set very clear expectations for the developers too. So it's not that they're going to say, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to be able to develop in 2040 just because you don't need the lands today. No, that's not going to be laid out in the plan. It's going to say we're going to need them maybe much longer than that.
Okay. Councillor Koutoulakis.
Thanks through you to staff. What's preventing us from really engaging in the ROP process and maybe suggesting that we expand this during the next review of the ROP and maybe get the ball rolling that way in terms of seeing the larger picture?
Ms. Bruce.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we would definitely be involved in the next ROP process. There's a lot of uncertainty now with Bill 23 on what that process will be. So that's why the next stage of the ROP, so there is another stage of the ROP that's supposed to be happening, has not started yet. So definitely we would be involved with that. When the ROP is planned, it's planned region-wide, and it is that smaller pieces of land that are added to the urban areas to accommodate the population projections. So we do see this as a little bit different than the small pieces because we have a larger piece of land and being able to plan for that area in advance. We give our comments to the region through the ROP process. Through the last ROP process, we did actually recommend originally a different option for land to be added, as well as a few other additional properties to be added to the ROP. Ultimately, we did support the ROP decision, but there was some other options that we thought also would have worked very well for Woolwich. So it's a balance and discussion.
Just to add to that, when we work with the region through this process, we would somehow at some point work to a population that they might be allocating to us. So we would use that to adjust our phasing. So at that time, if the region adjusts, we'd be working with them to figure out how much population do we need in Woolwich, for example, and then they would handle that population to us in the ROP. We would then adjust our official plan to match accordingly and readjust our staging as necessary. So we would then bring on maybe a stage earlier than we maybe anticipated because population targets are going up, or we'd say, oh, we have to scale back. We'd adjust our official plan accordingly and bring that through council to adjust. So we would work with them at all steps to that, to work to the plan that ultimately gets approved and then re-implemented that change into our plan too.
Councillor Schwinn.
We heard quite a bit tonight about trying to get densification and infill. You mentioned that in your comments too, that we're trying to do that within Elmira St. Jacobs. What are some of the carrots we have to encourage that instead of the new greenfield sites? Because you want both to be happening. How do you encourage the infill?
So through the chair. So there's different methods. Right now we partially do it through just taking allocation and not handing out all the allocation to greenfield and setting aside infill intensification target numbers. So that gives flexibility for them to develop. We can do incentive programs through TIFs, things like that, our community improvement programs that we could implement through our official plan and then give some sort of incentives to development to take place. We might do that, for example, in the downtown area. Now we have the core plan and we might want to encourage things. We could do things along those lines to encourage it. We haven't moved that way yet, but it's something we'll need to consider a little bit more of how we want to tackle that, especially as we finish up through our official plan process. Part of the official plan process we're going to do is going to have to look at intensification areas, and our consultants looking at that. And how do we encourage that intensification? So where and how do we encourage it is going to be one of the things in our new official plan that we're looking at.
Ms. Fruits?
Just to add to what Jeremy said, through you, Madam Chair, we have also looked at pre-zoning properties to allow higher density development. And one of the ways that we did this in Elmira was through our downtown urban design study that we did. We did add some higher zoning regulations to encourage intensification of those properties that were in the Elmira core area. So you can look at it that way through designations in the official plan and through zoning to allow that type of development as of right.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much for the conversation. What'll happen next is I guess I'll sleep on this and figure out what kind of letter I want to write to the minister and then bring it to council. It needs to be in by December 7th. So we have a meeting on December 5th. So I'll make sure that it's in your package for December 5th and pending any major upset around the table, we'll go forward with that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming this evening and for your interest and for your comments. Really appreciate it. Where are we? 10.1, proposed unfiltered and untreated human waste on prime agricultural land by regional recharge areas. I guess this is just a delegation, correct? Okay, we have Dawn Peace, Jasmine Winter, Rochelle Lanting, and Maynard Lanting here to speak to us. And I understand you've got 15 minutes to do your joint presentation, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, councillors, for the opportunity to speak tonight at very short notice. This presentation reflects the effort of multiple concerned members of our wonderful community. Our goal.
Oh, sorry. Tanya, can you put the present? There we go.
Our goal is to raise awareness about Weber Septic Services' proposal to use agricultural land in Woolwich Township for untreated sewage disposal. We also demonstrate the opportunities for the Honorable Mayor and councillors to get involved in order to protect the health and well-being of our community. I am Dawn Peace. This is my daughter, Jasmine Winter, and we live right next to the proposed site, along with my 2 other children and 30 animals. The other 2 speakers are Maynard and Rochelle Lanting, who live next to the proposed site with their 3 little girls and baby boy. Next slide, please. In this presentation, we would like to give an overview of what Weber Septic Services is proposing and speak to some of the concerns that we have. We will demonstrate that Weber Septic's proposal does not preserve agricultural land, threatens the quality of the drinking water supply of Woolwich Township, and conflicts with Woolwich's official plan and climate action plan, all while a local and environmentally friendly alternative exists for the reality of human waste. We hope that you will use your power to protect the environment and the constituents of Woolwich Township as you have done in the past. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. On November 14th, several property owners adjacent to 1430 Spitzig Road, Breslau, received a notification in the mail that Weber Septic Services is proposing to purchase the nearly 100-acre farm at 1430 Spitzig Road for the disposal of untreated, unfiltered human waste. And yes, you heard that correctly. This is untreated waste taken straight from septic tanks and portable toilets to be surface spread over 25 acres of prime agricultural land. The planned hauling rate is 6 trucks throughout the day. Given that one truck has the capacity of about 10,000 liters, we estimate that there would be on average 60,000 liters of human waste delivered to the site every single day. Surface spreading is to occur all months of the year except during the freezing months. The proposal also includes 3 large frac tanks to be placed for storage of septage. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now that we all understand the nature of the proposal for this prime agricultural land, let's now talk about whether this is suitable use for this land. According to the township's official plan regarding prime agricultural land, agricultural uses pertain to food production. Uses not related to food production will be directed to locate elsewhere, while on occasion, treated and filtered human waste, which is also known as biosolids, can be applied to soil for nutrients, but this is not what the applicant is proposing. Secondly, the applicant is a commercial corporation. Buying this property, contingent upon an environmental compliance approval, shows that this purchase is about disposing waste, not about farming. Thirdly, while the notification letter mentioned a hay crop, the spreading of huge amounts of human waste throughout the hay will not allow hay to grow, much less be harvested. And a quick survey from farmers that we know showed that no animal owner would be interested in purchasing hay contaminated by pharmaceuticals, personal care products, pathogens, and microplastics. Finally, should one argue that this could be an on-farm diversified use, the official plan has multiple criteria that the applicant does not meet, as they are proposing to use roughly 30% of the farm for their disposal sites, and their uses does occur with odor, noise, refuse matter, and water carried wastes. In the next slides, we will demonstrate how this proposal threatens the integrity of the township's water supply. Next slide, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to talk about drinking water. Did you know that Kitchener-Waterloo is the largest region in Ontario that is almost entirely dependent on groundwater for its drinking water? Protection of our groundwater is therefore of utmost importance. In this map from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, you can see the area in purple called Wellhead Protection Area E. These are areas that contribute water or are in close proximity to municipal water service wells and surface water intakes that are vulnerable to contamination from the application of materials to the land surface. You can see that the lands within the red border propose to receive hundreds of thousands of liters of unfiltered, untreated human sewage every season but winter for the foreseeable future are overlapping this vulnerable area. Next slide. Further, the proposed site is in very close proximity to regional recharge areas. These are environmental features in blue on the map on the right, and you can see the area outlined by the red square there, consisting of large deposits of sand and gravel that allow deep infiltration of large quantities of rain and snow, serving to replenish underground aquifers that are the source of a significant share of the township's drinking water. So essentially, you can think of these as drinking water replenishment areas. Now, the applicant's map on the bottom left does show that the landfill site in yellow is set back the required 120 meters from the regional recharge areas. But this doesn't tell the whole story. Next slide. What you can tell from these maps is the slope of this land directly towards the wellhead protection area and regional recharge areas. A Kitchener topographic map shows a vertical distance of 8 meters or over 2 stories from the spreading site to the site for drinking water replenishment. Pictures never do justice to hills and valleys, but you can easily see that after significant rain events, water runs down the slope and into the neighbor's horse pasture. Yet another characteristic of the land that makes this a particularly poor choice for septic applications is the soil composition of the proposed land. Farmers in this area know that agricultural tile is unnecessary as the soil composition, which is essentially gravel, is ideal for absorbing surface water. In fact, when a neighbor just across the road put in a new septic system, the required land testing for the permit found the soil composition to be very similar to that of a gravel pit. Because of this, he needed to import and layer 3 different types of sand below the septic drain pipes to prevent septage from draining into the groundwater. We have a lot more to say, but let's take a minute to review this quickly. Number 1, the region has a much higher reliance on groundwater than other regions in Ontario. Number 2, the site is on or near highly sensitive water reservoirs. And 3, the land slope and composition has characteristics that make water contamination inevitable. Given this, it is unthinkable to allow this to proceed. We don't want this township to host the next Walkerton tragedy. On behalf of our fellow township residents, we implore you to take action. Next slide. And what exactly are the drinking water contaminants we should be concerned about? So you can see the list: pharmaceuticals, personal care products, detergents and flame retardants, heavy metals, and these are particularly from industrial plants, pathogens, including bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and prions, parasites, antimicrobial resistant genes, and microplastics. And I should add that this list comes from a study evaluating the risks of land application of treated human waste. Given that we are talking about sewage, which is untreated and unfiltered, these contaminants are even more of a concern. Soil health from long-term application is a concern, along with damage to habitats for wildlife and possibly endangered species. And lastly, the proposal is in direct conflict with the township's official climate action plan, which speaks of promoting local food, food security, and soil health, and protecting the agricultural land base. Windborne pathogens, next slide. Windborne pathogens are also a concern. This study from Arizona shows that the risk of windborne pathogens is significant within a 10-kilometer radius of a sludge spread field. This would put residents of Breslau, Maryhill, Bloomingdale, and parts of Kitchener at risk. And the risk goes up with increasing wind speeds. Residents of Spitzig Road and the surrounding area can tell you that this is an extremely windy location with the prevailing wind direction from west to east, which is straight towards Maryhill. And once again, this study is talking about the risks of treated human waste. And in our case, the infection risk is even higher because once again, we are dealing with untreated waste, and the treatment process for waste significantly decreases the pathogen load. So I will now hand over to Maynard, who will go over the applicable zoning bylaws and present opportunities for involvement to the council. Next slide.
Thank you, Rochelle. With respect to zoning, we respectfully request that the township review the zoning conformance for this property and reject the applicant's proposal to use it as a storage and dumping ground for untreated sewage. We have demonstrated that the intended use is not in keeping with the township's official plan regarding primary agricultural areas. But further to that, we would like to show that the spreading of the material on agricultural land is also not permitted on a regulatory level. For the benefit of those watching on the live stream, I'd like to explain a little bit about ASM and NASM. The Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, OMAFRA, has regulations that limits what materials you can actually put on an agricultural field. And they put these different materials under 2 different headings. One is ASM, which is agricultural source material, and NASM, which is non-agricultural source material. We all know that human waste would not be considered agricultural source material, or ASM, but with regards to it being NASM, non-agricultural source material, OMAFRA explicitly excludes untreated septage. For your reference, you can check Schedule 4 of Table 3 of the Nutrient Management Act 2002, which states that sewage, biosolids, or any other material other than untreated septage that contains human body waste or results from the processing of materials that include sewage, biosolids, or human body waste. After reading it very slowly a few times, I'm just a farmer, I understand that what they are saying is this: sewage that has been treated is permitted on agricultural lands, even if it has human waste in it. but untreated human waste is not. I have a smart wife. So, as well, the proposed accessory storage containers that they talk about would have to be constructed of solid concrete material, whereas they are proposing frac tanks. In addition, the storage containers would have to be greater than 300 meters, from a residence, and that they're not. This next slide, please. Okay, I'm gonna skip over this because we're running out of time, and she did a great job over there, Jasmine, about that. So diversified use, she covered that. So I think we can all agree on the seriousness of the applicant's proposal and the profound negative implications this has for our township. Thankfully, there are multiple opportunities for the township to get involved and protect the health and safety of our residents and our drinking water. As can be seen from the official website regarding environmental compliance approvals, a municipal consultation is required prior to initiation of the ECA process to ensure that there is understanding of applicable bylaws, proper zoning is in place, and there is compliance with the official plan. Consideration of the impact on sources of drinking water must also be done. And I think that what we've seen tonight is that the impact is very concerning. Can we have the next slide? Thankfully, there are environmentally friendly options available to deal with the ubiquitous problem of human waste. The region of Waterloo has award-winning, environmentally friendly wastewater treatment technology. It owns 13 wastewater treatment plants, 7 pumping stations, and a dewatering facility. These operations are overseen by the Ontario Clean Water Agency. The region of Waterloo website specifically states that they are accepting of discharges from licensed commercial haulers such as the applicant and are continually expanding to meet the demands of the increasing population in the region. We would like to ask the council to write a letter to the Ministry of Environment highlighting concerns to groundwater and groundwater in particular, that is most important, and the zoning issues as well. We would also like the council to notify Weber Septic that the zoning does not align with the activities they would like to do on that property. Next slide, please. In summary, the current proposal from Weber Septic Services is untenable. It conflicts with the township's official plan, conflicts with the agriculture zoning of the property, and poses significant harm to the residents of Woolwich Township. If there is a local environmentally friendly solution, we are grateful for businesses like Weber Septic Services who deal with sewage. It's a necessary fact of life, and we are thankful to propose an alternative option for them to deal with the waste they pump from our septic systems. Thank you all, council, Mayor Shantz, and councilors for your hearing us, and thank you to many of those listening for your support and the valuable contributions. A lot of them in the crowd here from the community. This has truly been a community effort. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Good timing. Are there questions for the delegates? Or staff? Councilor Burgess.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the delegates. In the one email we received, you had a Word document which looked like a letter drafted for the ministry. Have you sent that, and have you heard a response yet from them?
I sent that, and no, we have not.
Okay. And just to follow up on that, do you know when they will start applying in the field and how long of a window you have to make a case?
14. Just go use the mic. Yeah.
So we don't know when the purchase goes through. We know that they have purchased the property. A condition, yeah, there's a real estate agent. She would know better.
We don't know the particulars of the offer. We've received the letter.
Can you speak at the mic?
Sorry. Thank you. We don't know the particulars of the offer or what has been signed. We know that the homeowner, the farm owner, has given permission to the potential purchaser to apply for this. And if they don't get this approval, then I don't believe the sale would be going through.
So the application, and sorry, I don't have all the details in my head. The application has been made to the ministry, or maybe you don't know that.
We don't know that. We just were, as adjacent property owners, we received a notification in the mail. And if you look at that, the one document there, there's many steps they need to do before they apply for the ECA. But the neighbor notification letter did give us a deadline of 14 days from the date of receipt. So that was November 14th, to put our complaints or concerns to the ministry. And after that, you know, that was the end of it. But kind of our question too is, prior to even initiating this process, they were supposed to have consulted with you guys, the municipality, and also consider the sources, the impact on drinking water. So we don't know if that's been done. We were just kind of shocked to hear this, and
we felt a lot of urgency. That's why we really pushed to get on the agenda. And we really are thankful that you guys took us on late notice.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other, I guess I have a question for staff just coming from that. Have we been consulted? Has there been any, anything from anyone?
So yeah, the staff have not received any consultation whatsoever from any level, maybe the landowners or the province. So we have nothing in front of us to speak to from a staff perspective.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to keep it to the delegation. I know I just went outside that, but Councillor Schwinn.
I'm just wondering, do you differentiate between raw sewage being applied in the land versus biosolids coming from a treatment plant? I'm not a treatment plant expert, but my understanding is basically they're taking the water out and you just have a more concentrated biosolid that's being applied in the land that I've had applied to my land, for example. So I'm wondering how we differentiate between the two, why one's good, one isn't. And also wondering if you know anything about the application rates that are being permitted, because I know in farming 5,000 or 22,000 liters per acre is typical.
Sorry, what's typical?
22,000 liters per acre would be typical. What are they proposing?
On a yearly basis? Yeah. You want to start?
yeah, I'll start. I don't know the particulars of what the treatment process involves, but I do know that it significantly decreases the pathogen load, because everything I've read, looking at contamination risks and all of this, talk about really make that differentiation. And most of the studies are looking at the sludge, the biosolids, something that's treated, because that's more acceptable. Like it really, you know, it is quite unacceptable to put untreated, unfiltered human waste products. I want to say something else, I forget.
So yeah, and I think that a difference where being a farmer and we are too, there's very high nitrogen and phosphorus content in that material, and that's what we need to have on our crops, right? So I can appreciate that, and that's something that I would want on my crops, and I think that that's one of the solutions that they could take. What they could do is they could develop with wastewater treatment plants a product that would be interested in actually putting on our crops. What they're doing now is they're just using it as a landfill. And so what's going to happen here is that there's going to be, I'm going to be blunt about it. There's going to be condoms, there's going to be tampons, needles, that sort of thing injected into the soil. That doesn't improve the soil as well. There's a lot of waterborne parasites and pathogens within the untreated stuff. And I think that's why it's regulated out. It's not allowed to be on these lands. I'm surprised that, I mean, there's some lands out there that are being grandfathered in, but I just don't understand how this could possibly be accepted. That being said, I don't want us to leave this up for the Ministry of Environment to make that decision for us here in Woolwich Township. As you folks said earlier, I think it was you in particular, we don't want to leave the decisions that we need to do locally to preserve our local area up to the province. We don't want to do that. And I think that that's something that we're really asking you folks to help us out here and protect our water. We really depend on it. Something that wasn't said as well is that there's a creek running through that recharge area. It eventually dumps out into the Grand River, and that's where we get our drinking water as well. And there's a lot of wells in the area. So I think that this is yes. So there's danger here for sure.
And just with regard to your question about volume, what we know right now is it's 60,000 liters are going to be delivered per day. That's what the owner has told I think he told you, right? Yeah, so that's what we've been told. So 6 truckloads per day to the store, to the 3 frac tanks. And then I guess they dump it all on like once a week or something like that. So then, but obviously they're going to have to keep up with that rate of delivery because those tanks will get full. So, and it's over 25 acres that they're taking 25 acres of the 100-acre land that they've, and basically their whole map is just to go with the 120 meters that you need to be away from the wetlands and all that. But, you know, that's if they stick to it, right, as well. Yeah, surface spread. Yeah,
where it's marked to be spread all around the areas, it's basically sloping down. I was walking through today trying to get photos, but you have to really, I'd love for you all to come out and actually see what we're talking about, but it's running down on every side of it.
It's like there's a plateau and then it runs into
Yeah.
her property, it runs down into the recharge areas. It's gonna get in the water, guaranteed.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to staff and then see where we go. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I've got questions and I've got comments. I have been out to the site. I have seen the way the land drains, and what they're saying is correct. It is like a plateau and it runs to the wetlands, runs into Dawn Peace's property, that pond you saw her show. That's where it would run. Runs across the road down to the creek. I think this is a health and safety hazard myself. And I question why our zoning would allow what I would consider an industrial use on our agricultural lands. I just see this as an accident waiting to grow into a major catastrophe. There's a lot of young children on Maynard's farm. He's got 4 right now. And I just don't want to see this stuff spread on the fields if it's not treated. I think we've got a big problem, but maybe staff can answer, why are we allowing this untreated stuff to be poured on our farm fields? That's prime agricultural land that runs through gravel into our drinking water. That's a major concern for me.
You're the chair to Councilor Bryant. So the best way I can answer this is ministry regulated by the province. So this has not been directed down. It's not handed down. It's not a land use planning issue. It is a ministry issue from an environmental perspective. So it stays at the provincial level, and staff obviously then aren't able to regulate that at our level. And nor do we have the expertise to regulate something like this. So the rules that are set in place by the province are done through experts at the province who understand this far better than any of our staff can and will be able to understand at this point. So that's where the best interests lie, and those are the ones who set the rules and know more than we would. I couldn't answer, like they set distances to wetlands and existing wells, things like that. They know what the requirements are and what can or can't be spread. And they would also then be the ones reviewing the term, is this an appropriate product to spread or not? Does it meet the requirements or not? Would be left to the ministry. It is a fairly common practice to see sewage spread on farms. We actually have a few in the township, actually, operations like this. So this isn't abnormal. It's actually quite common, and that's why the province regulates it from their end to set the standards clearly across the province. I do have to clarify something. We did check with the region about some of the comments that were raised in the presentation about wellhead protection and recharge areas. This property and these lands are not in a wellhead protection area. They're not in a recharge area. And they're well outside of any Clean Water Act area. So that information, I'm not sure where they got that from, but the mapping from the region and clarified with regional staff who know what the mapping says and where that information, that is not correct. So we have to clarify that is not a regional recharge area. It's not a wellhead protection area in that vicinity. There's none anywhere nearby in that location. So to the chair, man. Through the chair, the region has confirmed at regional staff levels that I have the letter right in front of me from regional staff that said it is not. And they have it in their official plan, so.
So the region says it's not. You got the information from GRCA? Yes.
So I called the GRCA. The guy's name is Trevor. So Trevor said you might want to look into the Source Water Protection Act or Source Water Protection maps. So I went on and there's an interactive map that you can use.
On GRCA site.
on the MECP, so Ministry of
MECP,
Environment,
okay.
something in Parks, Conservation and Parks.
Yeah.
So it's an interactive map. So when I went on it, and I don't mean to say anything negative about the Woolwich map, but they also have protection maps. And I'm certainly not advocating that you update your maps. I think this is great. Let the ministry take care of that. We don't need to spend more tax dollars on this stuff here when it's already been done. So so I went on the MECP and so I zoomed right in, and that's where I got that map. If you want, we can bring that PowerPoint presentation up again. That was a direct screenshot off of there. That purple area marked is a wellhead protection area. So it's a wellhead protection area E. So it's a class E, and it being a class E, they say those classes are particularly vulnerable to surface contamination, which is exactly what we're speaking about right now. So it couldn't be, I mean, in a way I was pleased to see it, because to me that's a clear no-go right there. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? So and it also would defy common sense as well to have it in that place, right? Like it's right near the recharge area. There's all sorts of water there. John Mesina's got all these ponds with fish in it. So also sort of aquatic. Sorry, I'm going on.
Okay.
I think you get the
Thanks.
point.
I just wanted to make sure we're clear on where the
Yep.
information was coming from. And so
Ministry of Environment, Conservation, Parks.
staff can look at that.
And the regional recharge area is from the official plan, and it's kind of mixed in with this other like blue and green. So core environmental feature and regional recharge area is all part of that conservation area. And we said it's not on the regional recharge area. I said it was in close proximity because it's like basically contiguous lands, and there's 120 meters. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry. You mentioned that it's being spread on other lands in the area. Is it untreated sewage that's being spread, or is it biosolids?
Offhand, I don't know which one it is, but we have other facility locations spreading sewage of some form or fashion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cadell.
I just had a question. Staff may not have the answer at their fingertips, but what is the regulation from the province around untreated sewage and spreading?
To the chair, I really don't have the details. I've tried finding, it seems like the province allows spreading of materials and then they regulate that through their process, the license. So their license would review whether it's compliant to their requirements under the Nutrient Management Act and the ministry guidelines. So I don't have the details. That's where the province would have to answer that. A lot of these questions are questions that have to be proposed to the province who have the expertise and the answers, not staff, unfortunately, because it's outside of our jurisdiction.
So, sure, Councillor Burlington and Councillor Burgess.
Go ahead. Another question for Jeremy or Deanne. Do we have the ability to put a bylaw in place regulating this type of a thing before it goes to the Ministry of the Environment?
Through you, Madam Chair. So no, this is outside of our responsibility. Like as planners, we zone land. We don't have any expertise in this area. We don't know the details of this process because it really is a process that is taken care of by the ministry. It's an application process that goes to the ministry, and they have their expert staff that do their review. We don't have any expertise in this area.
Okay, can I have one quick follow-up? Do you know if they come out and inspect these sites at any point in time? I know like with the MNRF, it's once every 5 years if you're lucky that somebody will come out, and I'm concerned if that's the way they're regulating it, they may never come out and see what's going on.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I don't know their process. I'm not sure, Jeremy, if you know their process. I'm assuming they would have some kind of inspection process, but again, because it is completely their process and it's not at all delegated down to us, we don't have involvement.
Councillor Burgess.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Shantz. Just for clarity, you mentioned that we don't have any control over the spreading of biosolids through zoning, but do we have any control over the installation of the tanks? And can we regulate it all through that?
Yes, so through the chair to, we do have a provision in our zoning bylaw that allows the storage of biosolids on a farm parcel, as long as the material is to be spread on the subject farm parcel. This was put into place in the 2000s just to ensure that we weren't getting materials stored on a farm parcel and then spread all over the place, to making a really industrial commercial operation. So then it became a pure application to that farm, like a fertilizer type process. So it was tied then to that farming operation. And that's where we have the regulations that it be stored in a concrete tank, X number of meters from a house, that kind of thing. So neighbors, so we have those regulations in place if somebody was to propose one on our property. And I think we have 1 or 2 in the township already.
And it doesn't matter where it comes from or how much goes on the field, as long as it's spread on that field from that tank, that's.
So the material where it comes from is regulated by the province, for the ministry. So the ministry regulates all that, the collection, the storage, and the material that's stored and the spreading thereof of it. So it's all regulated by the province.
Rochelle wants to speak again. I don't know if you're.
I think we'll try to keep it at council. I know, yeah, that's our process.
Can I just,
Yeah.
one follow-up, sorry?
Sure, yeah, go
This is
ahead.
just a general one, kind of following up from Councillor Bryant, but we're speaking a lot right now that it is under the provincial and the ministry control. Do you have any advice on steps we can help or they can take other than writing a letter? Like, is there, just in the general sense?
So. Ms. Freeze?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know, like there is a process that is lined out in the ECA application for commenting. So I would suggest that was the process, is to comment within that 14 days of receiving the letter. I don't know if the ministry has any other process in place.
So I guess I might say if council directed a letter to be sent, that I could write a letter on council's behalf. Councillor Schwint.
I think we're working a vacuum of information here. We don't know for sure to what degree spreading is going to happen, the amounts, current maps, that type of thing. And I think as a township, we should understand the regulations better. They're not our regulations, but can we do some homework to understand them so that we can inform our residents where it's a big issue? And then we can probably draft a better informed letter. I'm worried about shooting from the hip and not understanding the process ahead of time.
My concern is the timing.
That could be part of the
So
official request for information, and
28th.
we sent a letter requesting information stating as a township we're concerned and want to mark our names for the record as concerned, to stop that clock, so to speak. But to object to it right now, I don't want to do that, not understanding what we're objecting to.
Councillor Bryant?
Maybe ask for an extension of the commenting period to be put back by a few weeks. That gives us time to do some homework on it. Would something like that work? I don't know.
I mean, I guess we can
try. That's all
we
do.
can do we can do anything, right?
But I do have one other question for Jeremy while we're doing this. You
Okay.
mentioned these concrete tanks and you said biosolids, so they are only allowed to contain biosolids, or can they obtain liquids, or how does that work?
So yeah, there'd be some liquid in it, obviously, even
Right.
any kind of biosolid operation has some element of liquid. There's just
Right.
the
But
question of the
no-
mixture is there. We wouldn't control that and check that, to be
No, but
honest.
it would be filtered waste versus untreated, totally untreated with all the.
I'd have to check our definition before I
what's
could
allowed
give you
in those
that. Well, off the
tanks.
top of my head, I don't have the bylaw in front of me, but I think the wording is biosolid. Yeah.
Okay, because if that's the case, then there's a problem with what's being proposed for this site with these tanks, because it's untreated sewage going
So-
into the tanks is my understanding, but.
So when we receive an application,
Right.
that's something we can take a look at. Like right now, we're talking in an absence of anything.
Right, no, I understand.
And that's where the problem is until we have something or know what they're actually proposing, because the
Right.
letter doesn't tell us they're proposing any storage actually
Right.
on site. So until they come in with an application for staff to review, it's impossible to speak to it. And then we need to do our review then to determine and then analyze what's coming in and what it is and whether it meets the zoning requirements or not. And then if there's a planning process they need to go through.
Okay, and if it doesn't meet the zoning requirements, they would be denied? I'm just asking questions because it's stuff that's going through my mind.
So through the chair, yes, if they don't meet zoning like anyone else, we would lay out to them options.
Okay.
So they have always their options of whether they want to go, whether it's maybe a minor variance, whether it's a zoning process. And to start through that, and we tell them, we work through them with that. And sometimes, we obviously tell them whether we think we're in support or not as we move through that process. So they get a bit of a feeling of where things are going, if they want to spend the money or not to proceed. So those are the things we always do with everybody. We lay out the opportunities for them and they kind of review. And then if they wish to proceed and they need a planning application, let's say it's a zoning amendment, we'd be, obviously seeking certain studies and reports to go with that for staff to make an informed decision to provide to council at that time.
Thank you.
So council, where do you want to go from here? Councilor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, I'm battling it with Jared here. Maybe let Jared go first.
I apologize, and I don't know the.
See you behind Kevin.
My apologies, Mayor Shantz, but just a suggestion, maybe, sounds like we're needing information. I don't see what the issue would be with staff reaching out to the district office in Guelph and getting a hold of the MECP further to better understand at least. I don't know the timing and I don't know the backstory here, but I think that's something that we've done in the past for ECA. So I think that just be something could recommend to council that staff could do that.
Councilor Grant.
I was gonna say, through you to the rest of council, I would support us writing a letter with the caveat of what Councillor Schwindt said, which is requesting a delay in the commenting period, simply so that we can get more information and have a clearer idea of this process. It does sound like the purchase of the property hasn't gone through yet, so it seems fairly early in the process. So I think that asking for a delay in the commenting period is not something that should be completely out of the wheelhouse for the ministry, but who knows?
Yeah, who knows? We can certainly ask for that. I would also include what our concerns are.
Yeah.
Because there's a chance that they're going to say, well, you're not a commenting agency anyway, so.
Yeah.
So at least we can get our concerns. Yeah, David.
I wanted to ask council if you wanted to go even one farther than what Jared had suggested, which is my thoughts were going to be, not only can we connect with them, but it's conceivable that as part of your letter that we asked for ministry staff to come to council to speak on this issue. I think we've done that in the past where we ask other bodies to speak to the issue. The reason I'm suggesting that as well is I'd like to find out whether it is out of the Guelph office or whether it's out of the Hamilton office. And I think this would also give us an opportunity. In the past, we've also been able to reach out to the director out of the Hamilton branch to see, whether they would be willing to come or what would they be willing to provide to us in terms of information, so that council has all the information it needs to make an informed decision on December the 5th. So I like the idea of writing a letter, asking them to pause, asking them that, an outline that have concerns, but these concerns cannot be addressed without understanding the process. And would you be able to provide a delegation to council if council was interested in that?
Councillor Schwindt.
I'm halfway on Mr. Benjamin's page, but do we really want them presenting to council, or would we be better off having a meeting with staff, but also the residents who are interested, so they get firsthand the information? And there's a whole lot more calendar room rather than next Tuesday night only. It could be anytime in the next 7 days where we get a group of people together. So I'm not too sure that coming before council is as helpful as before staff and residents who want firsthand interaction.
You're suggesting a separate meeting that they have with, just with the community? Or,
Community and staff, so staff coordinates it, but invite members of the audience who want to understand the issue better.
Bonnie?
With all the letter writing, should we be copying in our MPP? Because this is a provincial issue, and should he be brought into the fold as to what is going on with the spreading of this? Because it's being done by the provincial government, basically. So I'm questioning
Sure.
whether he should be included in some of this so that he can bring it, if he has to, bring it to the legislature and raise the issue. Is this a safety concern or a health issue?
So a letter to the ministry asking for an extension on the commenting period. Also connecting with the ministry through staff to find out what additional information we can glean from that before we write the letter. And also then having the letter sent before November 28th, which I think is your deadline, right? You said 14 days. Did that make it the 28th? Did I do? Yeah. And something else.
CCing the letter to our NDP.
CC, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, if staff's getting information, I'd like to find a way to get to the residents almost firsthand. So if the ministry is willing to meet with staff, invite residents to that meeting. Keep everybody informed and ask the pertinent questions. I'm not gonna be an expert on this file, I know that.
Yeah. Okay, we can figure out a way to at least make that request of them. Okay, is there agreement around? Is that enough? Do we need a motion? No. Okay. Okay, thank you. That is what we'll do. There is no unfinished business. We have one item on the consent agenda for approval and one for information. Someone like to move the consent? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have items for approval, the summary of recommendations of Committee of the Whole dated Tuesday. That's the consent agenda. Yes, it is. Okay, thank you. We have a couple of staff reports, and Mr. Petherick has been waiting patiently to talk to us about the quarterly report. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know it's been a long evening, so I'll be somewhat brief about this. As the mayor said, this is the third quarter report of 2023. So from an operating perspective, we spent just over $9.7 million of our $13.1 million net levy budget. So that means we are sitting at a positive variance of 1.05%, which means we're in a surplus position, which is good. And if we start looking at where we were at this time in 2022, we were in a negative. So we've kind of turned that around, which is, I would say, even better. A couple of things I just want to highlight that's kind of making up the position we're in right now. One is with our interest income, and that's contained in the financial services budget. We had a provision to recognize $257,000 in interest income. And as I think most of us are aware, with the pretty steep incline of the interest rates, we are seeing that benefit, and we're receiving much more interest income than we anticipated. I think right now for the third quarter report, we're about $430,000. So, we're getting close to almost 200,000 over that budget. So that's good because that's revenue going in. One of the other things I think council needs to be aware of is with regards to the Ontario Land Tribunal expense line that we have. We have a budget of about $150,000. We've only recorded about $11,000. So therefore, what we have right now on our books is past council resolution and direction that any unused funds would be transferred into our OMB OLT legal reserve. So that is something to be aware of, so that while we're in a surplus position, some of it's already going to be earmarked to go into a very specific reserve. The other thing that I want to bring to council and ask for their endorsement, and if so, a resolution for that fact. Within the infrastructure services hardtop budget, we have $130,300 for surface treatment. These works were not going to occur in 2023. So what staff would like to do is have council's permission and a resolution to transfer those funds into the operating contingency reserve, which in turn, we would then be budgeting for them to be drawn out of that reserve in 2024 and the expense added in that budget year so that we can continue to do more surface treatment work. So that money would be earmarked for surface treatment and we can do more work in 2024. And of course, Mr. Poupe can answer a little more on that if council so chooses to. From the water wastewater side, we are still in deficit position in the wastewater, about 131,000. So it has improved since the second quarter, but I can tell you it has gotten a little worse in October. And of course, the wet weather we saw today didn't help as well because most of it is to do with our I&I, or the influent infiltration for those that can't remember what I&I was. And I think that's just for the general public's awareness. From the water side, we continue to be in a good surplus position. Again, similar comments that I had in the second quarter report in the sense that we've been catching up to, I would say the accounts that we kind of missed billing or because we were doing estimates in 2022. So we're catching up on those in 2023, just as I said, through the surplus deficit report of 2022 that we would be doing that. That's primarily driving the surplus that we see so far. And so I'd anticipate more likely by the end of the year, we'll end up 2023 with a deficit in wastewater and definitely in a surplus position in water. From a capital perspective, this one of the comments is we're seeing increased expenditures, and that would be typical for us because work is continuing on. We'll still be waiting for invoices to come in to finalize our projects for the end of the year. But for council's benefit, the capital summary statement, we do have comments. And we also have staff here. So if any member of council has any comments or questions for staff, we'd be happy to take them.
Okay, Councillor Grant. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to the rest of staff. I have two kind of questions. One is relating to just the service level numbers for the statistics for bylaw enforcement. I sent an email to Jeff about this earlier. I just want to know if the statistics we were showing were from 2019 to current. And I'm just wondering if there's any variance that we're seeing from 2018 numbers that kind of pre-COVID. Do you want to take that?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, and thank you for the heads up. I'm going to try to share my screen here just to give you a visual. And sorry, bear with me here. There we go. I think I got it. So in answer to your question, we've been seeing, oh God, that's so small. Can I? A little better? We've almost been seeing, just wanting to put me back there, that our parking tickets have been going up since the pandemic, or sorry, bylaw service requests have been going up since the pandemic. But I think that's also related to just our growth and our requests for service. A lot of complaints coming in that we wouldn't have dealt with before, and new types of requests. If you look there, I did an average. So over the past 10 years or so, we've been looking at about 700 complaints on average. And if you look at just what we've done in the first 3 quarters of 2023, we're pretty much at that number there. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
No, thank you. That was helpful. I just, from a contextual standpoint, I was wondering how COVID kind of affected, and if we're seeing now that things have opened up, if we've seen more complaints or if it's kind of more related to growth. My second question, and I apologize because I didn't give Anne a heads up on this beforehand, but I just want to know if we're seeing a return to our pre-COVID numbers for our recreation centers.
Through you, Mayor to Council, I would say drop in activity and that type of programming is consistent with pre-pandemic. I would say some of the minor sport groups are not seeing the rise back. You know, we're looking at 10 to 20% decrease in participation from pre-COVID. Whether that will level out, it still remains to be seen, but it is something that is being seen consistent across the country, not just not with us.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Richard, did you you talked about some funds that you wanted to put in different places. Do you, I wasn't clear. Do you want that direction tonight?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you give us a recommendation? I don't
Snippet?
see one in
Sure.
the report.
No, it would, if council is willing to support this, that we transfer 130,500 from the surface treatment program and the infrastructure services hard top budget into the operating contingency reserve to be used in 2024.
Moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? That's carried. And was there a second one or
Nope, that was it, ma'am.
just the one?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Do it quick. We're tired.
Tonight's the night.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next, building official position, and I'll call on Chief Building Official Nick Racanelli. Welcome.
Chair, good evening, council and mayor. Concerning staff report ES 45-2023, this is a response to the request from council during the previous budget meetings of May 2022, where for the approval of 2 new building official positions, where council requested staff come back to the council before hiring the second building official position. So we decided we'll be holding off on hiring the remaining vacant position until permit activity increases. The postponement will be reconsidered in Q2 or Q3 of 2024 with the reassessment of current and anticipated building activity. In the report, you can see the numbers that we've seen, the decrease of 15% over the last few months. Is there any questions on that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No, not Councillor Cadeau.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Mayor, through you, to the staff. Are we seeing a similar trend in other jurisdictions? I would hazard to guess that we are.
Yes, it's in the report. Some of the other municipalities are about, actually some are even worse. So we're not too bad.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you for bringing that to us. Oh, we're just receiving this report for information. Do we need a motion? Yeah, a motion to receive. Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you for your patience. It's been a long night.
Thank you, no problem.
Okay, got that. Motion, resolution to participate in regional all councils closed session on December 8th. So it's a motion that a closed meeting of council be held Friday, December 8th in the regional council chambers for education related to Indigenous history and reconciliation. Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Schwint. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. And resolution to participate in a regional all council closed session on that's not a closed one.
Sorry, Mayor Shantz, that's an open
That's
session,
an
all
open
council
session.
meeting.
Yeah, on December 15th at 1 o'clock. Okay, I've got my notes, might be.
So, sorry, Mayor Shantz, I think that was a copy and paste error. It is a all council meeting, December 15th at 2 o'clock PM.
At 2, okay. Is it in the regional council or is it elsewhere? Is it? Yes.
In
at the
regional council chambers.
Council chambers, okay. Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Woolwich Heritage Committee Resolution, West Montrose Bridge Rehabilitation. Jeff, do you want to take this one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Shantz. So this memo was on your agenda because the region of Waterloo is seeking the township's feedback on the rehabilitation of the West Montrose Covered Bridge. Regional staff presented at the Heritage Committee, and the committee has provided a recommendation to council. Of course, a recommendation, if passed by council, would support the region's recommendation, a recommended rehabilitation alternative, which is to remove the existing steel Bailey truss and repair or replace deteriorated wooden truss members to achieve a 10 metric ton load limit. I was saying to Councillor Bryant, she may be able to tell council more about what happened at the Heritage Committee meeting. But I can tell you that the region came up with that recommendation based on an assessment that included the structural, social environment, cost, and heritage factors, with heritage being weighted the highest. And the resolution from the Heritage Committee speaks to the preferred alternative, the possible need to update the township's heritage designation bylaw for the bridge if that preferred recommendation goes through. And then there's also some advocacy from the Heritage Committee regarding restricting traffic to pedestrian, cyclist, and horse and buggy use only. I'll also say on that last point that the region has responded just at the staff level to advise that it would be very difficult to permit horse and buggies while preventing cars. And then just lastly, that for anyone interested in this project, there is another public consultation session, which is on November 27th, 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the West Montrose United Church. So that's tomorrow night.
22nd.
22nd. That's what I meant to say. Thank you.
Yeah. So just noticed, so this is a regional bridge.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they came to us looking for a recommendation
Okay.
to support what they're looking to do before they go out to West Montrose to represent to the community. They wanted the endorsement from the Heritage Committee.
Okay.
So that's what we've done, but you need a motion. I will move that if that's the case.
Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. I'll accept. So not permitting vehicular traffic, but
the recommendation. Sorry, that was just a recommendation from the committee that they would like to see it preserved as a foot traffic, bicycle, horse and buggy, but they want to try and keep cars off to preserve the bridge from future damage.
But you can't.
I know.
Do that.
No, but that's what the committee had asked for. So that was put in there as one of their little
Okay,
requests.
so is that what this council is recommending? Like, we don't have to recommend exactly what the committee
It's up to
recommended,
council what
so. I mean, we just, yeah.
I'm fine with it. Like, as Councillor Brian said, I'm not sure necessarily how we would achieve that. I know that was a discussion during the Peel Street Bridge about buggy traffic versus vehicles. But I'm still fine with that motion.
Okay, so we'll just put it in that way and they can figure it out. Yeah. Okay. Jeff.
Mayor Shantz, if it helps, I did speak with the project manager on this today. And she advised that they will go back out for more public consultation on that idea. So there is still lots more public consultation to happen. And they will come back to this council with more information on that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Mayor's report on regional matters. I think you all see the reports that come across, and it's getting late. So any council reports? No. Outstanding activity list? No. No notice of motion. We have a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw numbers 71-2023 to 76-2023, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal, and you can read those there. Moved by Councillor Schwint, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. I know for a while we used to we used to have 3 separate parts to do that. Okay. In case anyone's interested. That brings us to the end of the agenda. So a motion to adjourn. Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Bryant, all those in favor. Thank you. And thank you to all who participated, attended, or tuned in to the meeting tonight, and for your longevity. Council, please stay connected on Zoom until the live stream is stopped, and good night.